Hey, welcome everyone back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 143. I'm here with my co-facilitator, Lino.
Hello, hello everyone. How y'all doing today? How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good, brother. Yourself?
I am well.
All right. So tonight is Geopolitics. There is a docket in the description beneath the video. Please hit the like button as you come in, and we will get started. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to get in. Adrian Thomas, what's going on?
What you say?
People popping up in the chat, so I'm
Oh,
reading
okay.
them. All right, we're gonna get started. All right, first article is from RT.com. Iran showcases massive underground missile factory with new rockets and warheads galore. It's a picture of the, I believe that's the Shahab missile. Actually, it's the Desful ballistic missile. The facility was described by the Iranian media as an quote underground city, and its scale appears to be quite impressive. Footage from the scene shows vast corridors full of various missile parts, including warheads, all at different stages of assembly. The video the videos also show workers at the plant fulfilling tasks from merely spinning nuts to fine tuning some tiny electronic devices thought to be parts of the missile's guidance system. The new missile called Desful is said to be an upgraded version of the Zovaga ballistic missile system. It boasts a longer range of 1,000 kilometers compared to 700 and has twice the destructive power. Iran's media also released footage of the new missiles test said to be said to have been successful. Displaying this missile production facility deep underground is an answer to Westerners who think they can stop us from reaching our goals through sanctions and threats. Iran's Revolutionary Guard commander, Major General Muhammad Ali Jafari. Europeans talk of limiting our defensive capability while they have the audacity to allow their offensive power to be used to attack innocent people all over the world. The remarks came in response to the statement by the EU Council on Monday. The bloc said it was gravely concerned by Tehran's ballistic missile activity, urging the country to refrain from it. The EU statement came shortly after Tehran unveiled a new homegrown cruise missile said to have a range of over 1,300 kilometers. While Iran's missile program has been repeatedly criticized by the West, Tehran maintains it has solely defensive purposes, and halting it is out of the question. So, it's a big missile. Yes. That ain't no stuff that you put on your back and kind of strut around in the battlefield. That's something you need a big truck to carry that one around.
Yeah. Now my question is why? Okay, if they are building their missile armory underground, mainly for people to not destroy the facility because it's hard to penetrate. Because kilometers or deep under the surface uh, when you bomb things. Why? I don't understand why they're showing that off if they're trying to do this in a way that will that don't that the Europeans or Americans don't know, but still they're showing it off.
because Trump keeps threatening to take them to war. So the idea is if you show them your teeth, they're less likely to try to bite you.
Understood, understood, and I understand that. But Sifu says don't show them anything and let them dig themselves in a hole. You you want to say what I'm trying to say?
Well, when you're running a nation state, that doesn't typically work. Especially when you're under threat, you're surrounded by countries that are plotting to take you down. So their idea is if we show them a little something, um, they'll probably think twice about coming in. And that's what everybody's concern has been is whether or not the United States is going to go to war with Iran, because Iran was a part of that list that General
Yeah, I remember that.
Wesley Clark said
Dropped it. Yeah,
that the United States was going to plan on taking out 7 countries in the Middle East, including Iran. So there's an urgency by them to actually demonstrate that if you do hit us, we will respond, and this is what we're going to respond with. And I don't care if it is the Iranians or if it was Soviet-made missiles or if it's a Kalashnikov. Bullets hurt, man. Missiles hurt. I don't
yes.
care. I don't care who makes it. You get hit with something like that, you're not getting back up from it. Those are carrier killer based missiles. Those are things that they use to take out aircraft carriers with. So,
What's going on, Paul Brian? How you doing today?
Mr. Brian, what's going on?
Good evening, gents.
Yes, sir.
Getting comments?
No, I shall defer.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. That was my only thought, and I understand what you're saying because Russia does that. Russia shows obviously we talk about what they have on here often. Russia does that. I just thought, okay, if they want to attack us, they don't know what we have, so it'll be more of a surprise when we counter that type. And that way they're caught off guard, and we use that by them being caught off guard, they have to reevaluate, gather themselves up. Then a country will use that to set forth an offensive attack. So that was my thinking.
It could also be saber rattling, good old fashioned classic saber rattling. That yes, you are the big bully.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have the biggest stick on the block. But guess what? Now I have a stick, so I can hurt you the same way you hurt me. All right.
Yeah.
In case of me versus you, it may be death by 1,000 cuts, but you may take me out, but I will cause you serious, serious injury, and you will remember me.
Their nuclear program is only 45 days away. So from breakout. So they have the ability to get back in shape if so need be.
Well, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was viable. Ahmadinejad willingly shut down his program, and he invited in UN inspectors to come and witness the fact that he shut the program down.
Mhm.
And to a man, what those UN inspectors said, the program is as advanced technologically as any else on the world. If Iran just keeps the program going, they will have viable nuclear weapons. He's using it for nuclear power plants, but they can produce the same nuclear weapons as America, Japan, Britain, Germany, as anyone else can. So they
Mhm.
have the technology. He just chose not to use it for weapons grade material
And it can be converted to weapons grade. You only need 20%.
very easily. Very easily.
What were you gonna say, Lionel?
Oh no, I was listening.
Okay.
But yeah, I will say this. Iran is in a according who was looking at a map. Iran is in a good location in terms of being able to fight, or if you look at defend in bad situations, defend themselves from a land and sea attack. So obviously they'll have a more wide range of missiles than some landlocked countries. Um, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of their missiles are actually converted missiles. Ones that were formerly used as surface-to-air missiles in the 60s and 70s by the Soviets. A lot of those were converted over to ballistic missiles. All they had to do was to swap out a few parts, put a couple of Raspberry Pis in there, and they were already good to go.
mm. It's interesting stuff. They obviously they're gonna have to beef up their supplies because of the threats and because of that. I remember that YouTube video about 5 years ago
Hmm.
where he said that the U.S. wants to invade Iran. So obviously I know I know they know it. So obviously they're gonna beef up their military arsenal to a point where they think, per their intelligence, that they can fight off the Americans.
They could actually. There's a high probability if any of those countries go in that their days are numbered. You know, all those missiles that let me share my screen because I stopped sharing my screen. All those missiles that they demonstrated could easily hit and take out all of Saudi Arabia's high value targets.
And see, I don't think Saudi. Well, we talked about this before. Saudi Arabia is not ready for a war, even though Saudi Arabia is a big country geographically in
Mm-hmm.
size. They don't have a lot of citizens that are ready to fight, war ready. If you understand what I'm saying. So most of their countries, desert, it's out in the middle of nowhere, and their cities are the few cities they got is on the edge by the water. So, and they already use American soldiers to I won't say that extent, but they use other people to fight their wars. So Saudi Arabia isn't that ready for a war, and plus Iraq is across the little ocean from Saudi Arabia, so they can easily hit their cities.
Yeah, the thing about Saudi Arabia is that the military is really for their country, for the people on the ground, not really to go to war with anybody else. Because if push comes to shove and there's any sort of political upheaval, then what would happen is that the people are going to try to take down the kingdom rather than to defend it.
So they have more of a domestic military.
Excuse me.
Saudi Arabia has more of a domestic military.
The Saudi Arabia's military is more of a defense force rather than an offensive force like the United States or Britain.
Okay.
Um, their people are their political infrastructure or the lack thereof is so unstable and so fragile that it only takes a few a few hours of downtime before people start to rise up all over the country and bring down the government.
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia is still very much still the country that was just that when oil was discovered by Standard Oil back in 1932 or 33, I want to say.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
even then, the country was still very much stuck in the 1880s, 1860s. The country was very underdeveloped. Okay,
Hmm.
so outside of the capital and outside of two or three cities, the country is still in the Stone Age, uh, sand, desert. They don't believe, you know, much of the tech, much of the technological advancements of the modern day world. Country
Hmm.
really doesn't have.
Hmm.
And as Mike said, they have a civilian defense force. Their quote unquote military is a military in name only. They do not possess the capability to wage war. And even that 6 day war against Israel during the 60s, if it wasn't for the other Arab speaking nations that joined in with them, that would have been a 6 hour war.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay, so Saudi Arabia, outside of the oil fields and the oil production facilities and about 3 or 4 cities, it's a country of desert that is very much stuck in the 1860s. Very much, very little has changed, and that's why you see MBS with his major push to move the country away from the petrodollar and towards cutting edge tech. Because once the oil runs out, the country overnight becomes Afghanistan, one giant desert covered rock.
Yeah,
Oh,
they don't have they don't grow their own food to that extent because the ground is not fertile enough for it.
yeah,
Except
you can't.
except for dates, and
If they,
you can't eat dates for food.
No, you can't. Well, the major city they got is Riyadh, which is the capital.
Right. Well, there's
Medina,
Riyadh and there's
Medina,
Medina and
and it's another one. What's the other one? It's right next to Medina.
well, there's Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah,
Yeah, Mecca. Mecca. That's right.
and also Jeddah. But again, those are all small cities where outside of a few buildings, you know. So Saudi Arabia is not even. That's the driving force behind MBS doing what it is that he's doing. He realizes what the future is. The country
mm-hmm.
cannot sustain. The country does not have a sustainable future based on the petrodollar because what happens when the oil runs out?
Mm-hmm.
And if it gets to the point where the oil starts to slow down, it's already game over because now once the world knows your oil is slowing down, they're they're basically gonna rape you for anything. They're gonna price gouge you for anything that you want to do. So he's smart enough to recognize he has to move away from the petrodollar now. So by the time the oil starts to slow down, he has already positioned Saudi Arabia to move away from the petrodollar and still he won't have the largest stick in the room, which is what he has now globally, but at least he will at least still be on an even footing with everyone else once the oil starts to run out.
What's going on, Wilson Garvey?
Haiti here.
Good evening.
I think he might be on the go. Yeah, and the thing about Iran is that Iran has a very highly educated class of people. That's how they're able to develop nuclear technology. They have binders of nuclear scientists and information technology people. They're very strong in cybersecurity as well. So they're not somebody that's a pushover. As opposed to Saudi Arabia, where they do not cultivate their people in that way. They kind of gave them Wahhabism, but they didn't actually give them the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics because it runs contradictory to their public policy. So they have to import a lot of their educated class of people from the Philippines and I think uh, Pakistan and a few other places. What's going on, Wilson? Wilsonia?
What's going on, brother? Peace of all the gods in the chat room.
Yes, sir.
Um, I will like to interject real quick. I would think that the Saudis would do as the Chinese are doing, and perhaps they are, obviously because of the larger demographics in China compared to Saudi Arabia. It's probably not the same, but you would have those who will say that what the Chinese are doing, at least if not the CCP, then obviously the well-to-do, the wealthies, is basically invest in hard assets on an international scale. Those people will say, well, evidently the Chinese know something about their company, about their economy that nobody else does, because it seems that the mice are starting to leave the boat, or or how does the adage goes? Animals know before humans when an incoming storm is coming in. So it would behoove the Saudis to do that. I mean, since it is uh, a theocracy, I mean, I would think that it would be easier on a collective to start doing that, but I mean, again, perhaps that's not even, they're not even looking, they don't have the vision. They don't have a 100, 200, 300 year vision as the Chinese do. So that's really my 2.5 cents.
You actually bring up a very good point about how they run their political structure is kind of similar. But I would also add to that they tried to add or at least MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, tried to add, the Neom City project, and that, that kind of went kaput because of that Khashoggi killing. So they, at least they had one visionary, a millennial who tried to diversify their portfolio, but it might be a little, too little, too late.
Well, we'll see as far as too little, too late. But Mohammed bin Salman, he is the crown prince, but he seems to be one of the few people who realizes that he needs to move the country away from the petrodollar. He needs to. He's trying to create new technologies and leading edge tech to move the country away from. He has that technology center city that he's trying to get built. The problem is the very nature of how things are run in Saudi Arabia. The crown, even though the country is a strict monarchy, the crown shares a very tenuous dual relationship with the clergy. And if the crown has to at all times curry the favor of the clergy, or else things will fall apart. And the great houses that make up the royal court, they don't all like the Al Saud family. So there's always that delicate game that always has to be played. The problem there is the clergy want the country to stay the way it was before the Al Saud family even took power, and the great houses seem to be more concerned about keeping their pockets lined. So, on the one hand, MBS has a huge road ahead of him, but he has the right idea. But bringing that into fruition so far has proved very difficult for him.
This reminds me of the same balance that's going on in Iran. It's the mullahs that elect the supreme leader. Same thing with Khomeini in Khomeini right now. So it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, and I think that it's a cultural problem. I mean, we all know it. It's a very delicate balance because now once you start liberalizing certain aspects, first the education, and then I mean, it's perhaps they see it as a potential Pandora's box. This reminds me of a documentary I was watching about the Gypsies, and then you have certain clans in the Gypsies where they're complaining about the young kids, man. Social media was a very, 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 very big issue because they weren't upholding the traditions that the previous generation was. I guess in our term, they would be boomers, and the new ones are millennials. So I think that that's something. I mean, all that has stuff, has some type of role to play as far as I mean, again, Wahhabism, strict traditionalism, and clashing with the sign of the times, modernism. Hell, Iran went through that with the Shah as well. The Shah was more secular than he was religious, and there was a time where the women didn't have to wear any uh, uh, hijabs and things of that sort. So I mean, again, perhaps that's something that they don't want to happen, or they're just not ready for, or they understand the threat to their whatever power that they have, not only on a cultural level, but on a on a societal level as well.
All right, let me get to this next article. All right, next one is from BusinessInsider.com. Iran released a quirky animated video showing one of its new submarines sinking a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier strike group in a funny, cartoonish way. But that threat that Iran submarines pose to U.S. aircraft carriers is no joke, and it's unlikely the U.S. takes it as a joke. The video opens with a shot of a Navy aircraft carrier strike group transiting the Persian Gulf to the guitar solo in Queen's "We Will Rock You." Next, the camera cuts to an Iranian submarine surfacing as the music switches to a menacing orchestral score. Then we see the destroyers accompanying the U.S. carrier go down with deep booms and ripples one by one, until finally the carrier itself raises its bow out of the water and sinks. Two jets on the carrier's uh, flight deck scurry off at the last moment, possibly as an attempt at comedy. This is just a picture of the animated video. Finally, we see the triumphant Iranian submarine dragging the intact but sunken U.S. Ships behind it as a narrator boasts about Iran's very advanced Ghadir class submarines. While the Ghadir class might not be advanced at all by objective standards, a hole in the U.S. submarine defense means it actually does have a fair shot at sinking an aircraft carrier if it can get close enough for a shot. Iran's Ghadir subs take much of their design from North Korean submarines. The ships are small and powered by diesel engines that charge electric batteries that power the sub while underwater. The submarines are noisy and can't travel far away from coastal waters. U.S. submarines are big, nuclear powered, and focus on stealth and acoustic superiority, or essentially hearing an enemy submarine before it's heard. Yeah, these are I think these are called midget submarines, if I remember correctly. That might be the term. All I know,
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wouldn't
midget
see how.
submarine.
Yeah, I, that them sinking multiple uh, ships in a carrier group with
Hmm.
a diesel powered submarine is not going to happen because, as the article said, not only the Navy submarines pride themselves on acoustic silence and hearing the submarine before it comes, you're going to hear that one. It's diesel. Diesel make noise. It's a huge engine, huge engine, and to make noise. And in that movie, Hunter Killer, when a guy was in the torpedo room and he was tightening the bolts, and if he would have dropped that wrench, the other submarine would have heard them that wrench drop. If they
Hmm.
can hear that, then and that's actually true. If they can hear that, then they can hear uh, diesel coming even before you shoot off your torpedo. So I don't believe that uh, mini or midget submarine with a diesel engine will do that type of damage.
Hmm. Paul Bryant.
Well, I see this as pure propaganda for Iranian people and maybe any other peoples of the Arab speaking nations in that area because diesel submarines are zero threat to an American carrier strike group. They
Hmm.
can be seen miles away. They travel on the surface during the day. They only In fact, day and night, they only submerge when they go to attack. They're very slow. Carriers have anti-submarine warfare planes in the air at all times. Carrier groups have 3 to 4 submarines with them, in addition to the other ships that screen the carrier at all times. And Iran has zero modern day technology to fight carriers or carrier escort groups. They also do not have the experience or a history of anti submarine warfare. In fact, the only 3 nations on Earth that have history with anti submarine warfare are the U.S. Navy, the Kriegsmarine, and the Imperial Japanese Navy. The first one is still here, the second two don't even exist anymore. Okay, so I do not take this serious in any way, shape, form, or manner at all.
Sonia.
Nothing to say on my end. What about the Nazi Germany in the U-boat? Does that count as anti-submarine warfare as well?
Yes, that was what I said. The Krieg the Kriegsmarine
Oh,
was
excuse me.
the Kriegsmarine was the German state navy, and the Imperial Japanese Navy was the navy of the Japanese Empire. So the only 3 nations that had a history with anti-submarine warfare were the Kriegsmarine, the Imperial Japanese Navy, and the United States Navy. Two no longer exist. The only one that's still here is the U.S. Navy. Now, if you were to tell me that a nation state has a modern navy with modern technology with a history of anti-submarine warfare, then I would give some credence to your statements. Now, the Soviet Navy and the U.S. Navy never fought in naval warfare. We
Okay.
do, we do not know any of the individual engagements of the Cold War. Subs may or may not have been sunk. Engagements may or may not have happened. Neither side has ever admitted to anything. We don't know. But a caveat to all of that is everyone at this point is untested. Even the U.S. Navy, they're untested. So until we see anything happen, I personally dial back anything as far as this one's crumbling, that one's crumbling. The United States needs to be aware. At this point, everyone needs to be aware because until the rubber meets the road, until there are live torpedoes being shot at you, we don't know what's going to happen. Although we do know the U.S. has the best submarine technology. The Soviets have the best air technology. That's with jets. But for submarine warfare, we don't know what's going to happen. We do know the U.S. has the best tech. Beyond that, we don't know what's going to happen. So I can't make predictions either way. My money is on the U.S. Navy, though.
Understandable.
All right, let's get to the next article. Shame for humanity. This one is from AlJazeera.com. Shame for humanity. Turkey urges China to close Uyghur camps. Turkey has condemned China's treatment of its Muslim ethnic Uyghur people as, quote, a great cause of shame for humanity and asks it to close the concentration camps. In a statement on Saturday, Turkish Foreign Ministry spokesman Hami Aksoy said that China has arbitrarily detained more than 1 million Uyghurs. He said the Turkic Muslim population face pressure and, quote, systematic assimilation in Western China. Quote, it is no longer a secret that more than 1 million Uyghur Turks who are exposed to arbitrary arrest are subjected to torture and political brainwashing in concentration centers and prisons, Aksoy said. Quote, we invite Chinese authorities to respect fundamental human rights of the Uyghur Turks and shut down concentration camps, he said. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had once accused China of, quote, genocide, but has since established closer diplomatic and economic relations with Beijing. China's Xinjiang region is home to around 10 million Uyghurs. The Turkic Muslim group, which makes up around 45% of Xinjiang's population, has long accused Chinese authorities of cultural, religious, and economic discrimination. Practicing Islam is forbidden in some parts of China, with individuals caught praying, fasting, growing a beard, or wearing a hijab, a headscarf worn by many Muslim women who feel that it is part of their religion, facing the threat of arrest. Chinese embassy in Ankara posted a lengthy response to Aksoy's statements, saying that the accusations were false and urged the government to retract them. Quote, allegations that the Chinese government is attempting to eliminate the ethnic, religious, and cultural identity of Uyghurs and other Muslims are completely groundless, it said. Kenneth Roth, the executive director of the U.S.-based Human Rights Watch group, praised Turkey's move on Twitter. Quote, this is a big deal. Turkey is the first Muslim majority country to criticize China so directly for its horrendous treatment of Uyghur Muslims, and one of the most powerful Muslim majority countries at that. Um, what do you guys think about Turkey taking shots at China?
A lot of rapping. Perhaps they're trying to punch above his weights as far as rhetoric is concerned. But that's from my position. That's just nothing more than conjecture.
Hmm. I know.
Um, no comment. This I can. I don't think me reading from the surface will do it any justice. Maybe it's something about behind them doing this. But no comment.
Paul Bryant.
Well, we've somewhat spoken on this before. Turkey is in a position of they have nothing to lose, so they're going to make as much noise wherever and however they can because they have nothing to lose. And they seem to be forgetting that they're somewhat putting themselves in bed with Russia, maybe even China, depending on what the specific issue is. So, you know, I tend not to put too much stock in the words coming from Turkey because Turkey is also Turkey wants to take the high horse in regards to this issue, yet they seem to conveniently forget how they treat the Armenians. Okay, which is an old gripe, and also how they feel versus the Greeks, which is also an old gripe, but how they treat the Armenians. So again, when you when you yourself are guilty of the very same things that you another nation state of doing, I don't take you seriously.
Hmm. That's actually a good point about the Armenians, and from my understanding, they're starting to make better relations with Armenia as we speak, as Russia um, develops better relations with Turkey. Um, that's actually a very good point. We'll see what happens. I don't think that China is going to include them or on their you know list of invites for their annual Christmas party or whatever it is that they do. So
You just took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I don't see them at Li Jinping's Christmas dinner table.
hmm. All right, moving on to AlJazeera.com. Armenia coincidentally sends non-combat team to Syria at Russia's request. Armenia has sent a team of experts to Syria on a Russia-backed mission to help clear mines and provide medical assistance, according to the Armenian Defense Ministry. Um, Artsrun, I can't even pronounce this guy's last name, Haniasan, the ministry spokesman, said on Saturday that the team of 83 includes demining experts, medical personnel, and security officers. He said the team will defuse mines and provide medical help to the residents of Aleppo and northern Syria, emphasizing that they will stay outside areas of fighting. Russia has conducted a military campaign to shore up President Bashar al-Assad government with transport will transport the Armenian team to Syria and provide logistical support. Some Armenian politicians have criticized the move. The Sasna Syr party warned in a statement that teaming up with Russia in Syria could hurt Armenia's interests and undermine its security. The Syrian government forces regained control over all of Aleppo in December of 2016 after a long, devastating campaign of siege and bombardment against rebels who held the eastern side of the city for more than 4 years. Russia is Armenia's main ally and has a military base in the country. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu on Friday thanked his Armenian counterpart for deploying the mission. Quote, "You were the first to respond to our call to provide assistance to the Syrian people," he said. Before the war, Aleppo was home to 110,000 ethnic Armenians, one of the world's largest Armenian diasporas. About 22,000 have since moved to Armenia. So, Paul Bryant, what's your take on Armenians going to Syria to help out? Oh, Paul Bryant's gone. So I'll give my take. I think Armenia has a vested interest in Syria, but the fear is that if they start participating in Syria, that they may start experiencing terrorist attacks in Armenia too. But if that's going to be the case, then that's what you have a military for. That's what you have a police department for. You should be handling your state security, in the best way possible. But if you're worried that these ISIS cells may pop up in your neighborhood, good police work actually helps. So, Paul Bryant, what do you think?
Yeah, agreed totally. I pretty much echo everything that you're saying. I think that the waters right now are so muddied in Syria, and that's largely because of the U.S. And you know what? I would bet my season tickets that MI6 is involved here somehow as well on the ground. But
For
uh,
Armenia?
no, for Syria. But
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. There's MI6. There's been MI6 in Western Syria for quite some time.
right. But for Armenia, I don't know. I am just there's a lot of moving parts there, and I don't know if the government there has the wherewithal to guarantee the safety of their own citizens right now, much less sending. I don't know. It's to me it just it to me it seems as if you have you have enough of your own problems at home, which you can't even guarantee the safety of your own citizens to be worrying about sending anyone else help. You know, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, but Armenia only conflict is with Azerbaijan.
Cool. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, I know you have anything you want to
Yeah. Hmm. The article really says what I have to say because it says Armenia is a ally of Russia, and this really strengthened those ties with them by sending 83 people for demining medical personnel and security officers to help out Russia that's already there in Aleppo, which is the largest Armenian diaspora, which is interesting that the city has one of the largest Armenian diasporas in the world. Um,
I always thought it was California.
oh no, no, oh,
I always thought it was here,
Yeah, I thought in
New
New York.
York. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I always thought it was California though.
Mm, cool.
um, it's pretty. This this article is pretty. It says it all, but nevertheless, no comment. No, nothing more to say.
All right. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, next one is from Reuters.com. African nations sense upper hand in mineral standoff. African nations with rich reserves of copper and cobalt needed for the shift to electric vehicles, since they have an upper hand in negotiations with mining companies that are struggling to secure better terms. Days of talks at the mining Indaba in Cape Town, Africa. In Cape Town, Africa's premier mining investment conference yielded no tangible breakthrough between miners increasingly keen to reassert control over their natural resources. Copper and cobalt reserves are giving nations such as Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo confidence because of the difficulty in finding supplies elsewhere to meet the expected surge in demand. This has emboldened them to seek higher tax revenues from foreign mining companies. Mark Bristow, CEO of the newly enlarged uh, Barrick Gold, Barrick Gold, emerged this week as the big miners' prominent voice, holding meeting after meeting with mining ministers, culminating in a grand dinner on Wednesday night. But Bristow declined to be dawned on when he might get a deal in the toughest jurisdictions of Democratic Republic of Congo and Tanzania, whose governments are demanding terms the international mining uh, companies say are untenable. Quote, you can't negotiate with a deadline, especially in Africa, he told reporters. The challenge, he said, was to avoid undoing decades of progress as international lenders started calling in loan repayments, piling the pressures on nations such as indebted Zambia and populist governments make sweeping promises to their electorates. Quote, everyone has a responsibility to ensure the progress we have seen since the end of the Cold War across sub-Saharan Africa, he told Reuters. One of the biggest challenges right around the globe is populism and people hanging on to power by promising things that are improbable when it comes to delivering. That puts a lot of stress on a lot of things. So it looks like African countries are a little bit more braver now with the way things are going, and the market is starting to respond to it.
The article saying since a lot of these African countries, such as Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, and there's another one is stated, because they know that they have an upper hand in negotiations, because a lot of these minerals cannot be found anywhere else in mass except for their countries. Then other countries that want those minerals are now saying, um, we want our money back from what we bought, what we gave to you, what I gave, but I'll let you borrow, in a way to pressure or take the upper hand away that these African countries have. It's like a strategic plan to say, well, we want our money back. Oh, you can't pay us, then let us get that cobalt or copper at a discount. You
Right, they're
right?
in a position to negotiate, though. I understand what you're saying, but they're in a position to negotiate that because even if you want it on a discount, you still need to dig it out of the ground, right? So unless
Mhm.
there's some kind of ETF, some kind of exchange traded funds that are going to be negotiated.
Yeah. Now
Go ahead,
I
Paul.
agree with you. That's why I just got from the article.
Mm-hmm. Paul Bryant.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to see how this plays out because on on the one hand, the leaders of these nation states have these resources that the European countries want, which one would think puts them in a position to negotiate. On the other hand, On the other hand, these African nations still have huge problems with their infrastructure and their inability to feed their citizens. So I don't know if they have as much negotiating power as one might think, right? So it's interesting to see how these things play out. I would like to see more of the leaders of these African nation states negotiate a bit more. They do have some leverage. I disagree as to the extent of that leverage, but they do have some leverage for sure. So I think it definitely would be in their best interest to take more of a somewhat not necessarily aggressive, but definitely a bit more forward stance with negotiating these deals. Maybe to not focus so much on out and out remuneration, but maybe infrastructure investment, because Africa's largest problem is the lack of infrastructure. So that's somewhat my take on it.
Absolutely. Wilsonian. All right, we'll move on to another one Wilsonian's away for right now. All right, this one is from the Daily Nation. As Kagame steps down, Egypt takes helm at African Union. Rwandan President Paul Kagame Sunday handed over the African Union chairmanship to his Egyptian counterpart, Sisi. The ceremony was the climax of the 32nd ordinary session of the Assembly of African Union, Heads of State and Government Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The Egyptian president will work with South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa as the first vice chairman and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix uh, Shikahidi, as the second vice man. Nigeria President Muhammadu Isufu will also be in the executive representing West Africa, while East Africa will be represented by Paul Kagame. For the Congolese leader, the AU post could not have come at a more appropriate time. He was making his debut at the Continental Summit just weeks after being installed following a highly disputed election. The theme for this year's summit was quote refugees, returnees, and the internally displaced persons towards durable solutions to force displacement in Africa. President Kagame expressed confidence that his successor would take the AU to greater heights. Earlier, AU Commission Chairman Chad's uh, Musa Faka, Musa Faki Mohammed commended President Kagame's stewardship of the AU, saying the continent learned a lot during his tenure. Dr. Mohammed said the Rwandan enhanced the AU's progress towards autonomy and accountability. The meeting was also addressed by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who noted that though Africa had opened its doors to everyone in need, the same had not been reciprocated by the rest of the world, particularly the more affluent West. Quote, Africa's generosity to those in need is unmatched, said the UN chief. While multiple crises on the continent will be the end of heads of state from the 55 member nations, the summit will also focus on institutional reforms and the establishment of a continent-wide free trade zone. The Continental Free Trade Zone was agreed by 44 nations in March 2018, but only 19 countries have ratified the agreements, with 22 needed for it to come into effect. The single market is a flagship of AU's quote Agenda 2063 program, conceived as a strategic framework for socioeconomic transformation. Cairo is backing the initiative, but analysts say it will be less likely to focus on the financial and administrative reforms pushed by Kagame. President Sisi is expected to focus more on security, peacekeeping, and post-war reconstruction issues closely tied to the AU's 2019 theme. Quote, Egypt has an interest in Africa. They want to strengthen their position on the African continent, and they don't want to be seen as a country only focused on the Arab world. Mr. Gutierrez said Saturday that peaceful elections in Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Madagascar, as well as the peace deals in South Sudan and Central African Republic and the truce between Ethiopia and Eritrea were signs of a wind of hope on the continent. President Kagame, who has been leading international reform since 2016, pushed for a continent-wide import tax to fund the AU and reduced its dependence on external donors who will still pay for more than half an institution's annual budget. But member states have resisted this, along with the reform of the AU Commission, its executive organ. In November 2018, most states rejected a proposal to give the head of the AU Commission the power to name deputies and commissioners. I don't want to read too much into this because I think the gist of this is that you have Sisi who overthrew one government, which is Mohamed Morsi, in 2013 to take power, and now he takes power inside the AU 5 or 6 years later. I don't know if that's a good thing for the African Union. What do you think, Paul?
Exactly. It's like history repeating itself. It's when Hosni Mubarak had Anwar Sadat killed, and then you see the political upheaval that had saw Hosni Mubarak removed from power. Now we're seeing the same thing happen to Paul Kagame. So I have zero love for any of the governments of Egypt. Zero. And
Okay,
go on now.
I'm
What was yours?
gonna watch my words here. It's more of a question. Why do African presidents and heads of states think these Arab countries will have the best interests of Africa in terms of Africans at heart? And do you all think that these Arab countries can have one foot in the African Union and a one foot in the Arab world?
Well, you have to remember that Morocco and Egypt are on Africa. Okay,
Yeah, then I know.
Morocco is where Carthage. That's modern day Carthage. Hannibal the Great and his father. Um, really quickly, it was the Arabs who came to Africa and overthrew the Romans from ancient Egypt. So one noose was replaced with another. That's as far as I'll go as far as that. To stay specifically to your question, one, those are two Arab-speaking countries that are in Africa. So they do have a vested interest. As to the rest, personally, I think it goes back to what I just said. Al-Islam and the Muslim religion is so powerful in Africa. Okay, so the influence is prescient. It's there. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Okay, so that's something that's not easily overlooked. So when you look at Africa, you see these 54 nation states. Majority of people in Africa are Muslim. So I think that should provide somewhat of an answer to your question. So
The
it's a case of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say the other answer to Lionel's question is because it rotates by region every election, every time a head of state takes over. So East Africa was the last 2 years, or the last three, that's 2.5 years, and now it turns to North Africa. So Gaddafi's not in power anymore, so he can't be there. And Libya is a failed state. Um, and then you have Tunisia, which did not have the representation there, and Egypt is the only country that was close enough and stable enough to actually have a head of state take over, which is why they tried to secure um, CC spot in the president and not have these elections. They basically got rid of all their opposition inside Egypt. There's literally at this point there is no more democracy in Egypt. They got rid of all the opposition, all the political opposition, including Morsi himself. They locked up him and all the other members of that of the Brotherhood. So there is no other way around having an Egyptian or an Arab person inside the African Union as head. That was bound to happen. It rotates every few years, so that's why you have different heads of state coming in, such as Sisi, regardless of how bad he is.
Okay.
Well, Sonia Garbiite, I think he's away. All right, next one is from Aquarius.com. Nigerian governor warns foreign governments interfere in our elections and go back in body bags. On February 6, 2019, Nasir Ahmed El Rafai, a governor of the Nigerian state in northwest Nigeria, issued threats to foreign actors who dare to intervene in next week's upcoming national elections. While speaking on TV, Reuters reporter reports that he said, we are waiting for the person who will come and intervene. They will go back in body bags because nobody will come to Nigeria and tell us how to run our country. We have gotten that into independence, and we are trying to run our country as decently as possible. When the gods want to kill a man, they make him run. They make him run man first. That's an interesting statement. El Rafai has gone berserk. It's embarrassing that a public officer will be inciting and preaching violence simply because of a fear of imminent defeat of himself and Buhari. Following the suspension of Nigeria's Chief Justice and the appointment of acting Chief Justice of Nigeria on January 25th, the United States, United Kingdom, and European Union expressed their displeasure on the executive branch's decision without the support of legislative branch. The three governments have consistently called for a free, transparent, credible, and peaceful elections in Nigeria. The UK stands alongside in supporting a free, fair, credible, transparent, and peaceful election process. Yeah, right. However, their condemnation of President Muhammadu Buhari's unconstitutional suspension was regarded by the Nigerian government as quote, unfair interference in matters that are wholly internal. What it sounds like to me is they want to treat Nigeria as if it's Venezuela. The only difference is Nigeria has just as many people in it as the United States. I don't know if the United States wants to get into that sort of conflict. What do you think, Lino?
Politically, what he said wasn't right. Because as you can see, the person that's planning to be running against him said he took his words and said, "Oh, this person must be afraid to lose." Politically, what he said wasn't right. Politically speaking, as an African, I concur with them because you don't want these people interfering with your elections. You don't interfere with their elections, so why do you think you come here and interfere with ours? So I would say in those places, and Nigeria has a large population, 180, 200, I say 200 million people. Um, yeah,
Paul Bryant.
Well, you have to remember that the CIA was literally created as a carbon copy of MI6. Okay, so everything that the CIA does, every playbook is an MI6 playbook. So everything that the U.S. does vis-a-vis geopolitics mirrors the British government playbook. So I don't believe anything that the Brits say versus regarding warning free and fair elections in Nigeria. That's total BS, total garbage. Okay, it's all about the oil interests. It's all about the corruption that keeps the oil and gas companies in Nigeria, and they purposely, grossly suppress oil and gas production because they cannot allow Nigeria to become another Saudi Arabia, which Nigeria has so much proven oil reserves. If the production was allowed to take place as it should, Nigeria could be just as wealthy as Saudi Arabia in 6 to 12 months. So I do not believe anything that any of these former colonial powers say regarding Nigeria. Because at the end of the day, they would much rather have a country weakened and destable than to be on equal footing. That's what the U.S. does because that's what they learned from their father, the UK.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But there's also rumors that if that opposition person is elected, then it's a high probability that China may get a naval port in outside of Nigeria or within Nigeria. So we'll see what
I
happens.
don't. I, oh my God, never mind.
You were going to say something?
No, I'll bite my tongue on this
All right. Russia is expanding its strategic influence in Africa. This one is from Quartz.com. Much has been made much has been made about China's role and profile in Africa and the factors underlying its activities on the continent. Less debated is the spread and depth of Russia's contemporary presence and profile in Africa. There was a strong Russian influence in Africa during the heyday of the Soviet Union. The post-independence governments of Angola, Mozambique, uh, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, uh, Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Somalia, Ethiopia, Uganda, Benin, at some point all received diplomatic or military support from the Soviet Union. But this began to change after the superpowers started to collapse in December 1991. More than a quarter of a century later, Russia's President Vladimir Putin seems to have new aspirations in Africa. This in this is in line with his desire to restore Russia to great power status. Putin places a high premium on geopolitical relations and the pursuit of Russian assertiveness in the global arena. This includes reestablishing Russia's sphere of influence, which extends to the African continent. Like Beijing, Moscow method of trade and investment in Africa is without the uh, prescriptions of prescriptions or conditionalities of actors like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Russia is gradually increasing its influence in Africa through strategic investment in energy and minerals. It also it is also using military muscle and soft power. Increasingly, the present question is the relationship between China and Africa as good for Africa or as it is for China? The same question applies to Russia-Africa relations. Interaction between Russia and Africa has grown exponentially this century, with trade and investment growing by 185% between 2005 and 2015. Economically, economically, much of Russia's focus in African centers on energy. Key Russian investments in Africa are in the oil, gas, and nuclear power sectors. The fact that 620 million people in Africa don't have electricity provides Russia's nuclear power industry with potential markets. Several Russian companies, such as Gazprom, Lukoil, Rostec, and Rosatom, are active in Africa. Most activity is in Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Nigeria, and Uganda. In Egypt, negotiations have already been finalized with Moscow for building of the country's first nuclear plant. These companies are mostly state-run investments, often linked to military and diplomatic interests. Moscow's second area of interest in Africa is Africa's mineral riches. This is particularly evident in Zimbabwe, Angola, and Democratic Republic of Congo, Namibia, and the Central African Republic. In Zimbabwe, Russia is developing one of the world's largest deposits of platinum gold metals, platinum group metals, sorry. Russia has also been reestablishing links with Angola, where Alrosa, the Russian giant, mines diamonds. Discussions between Russia and Angola has also focused on hydrocarbon production. Uranium in Namibia is another example. Russia's current controversial involvement in the Central African Republic began in 2017 when a team of Russian military instructors and 170 civilian advisors were sent by Moscow to train the country's army and presidential guard. Shortly after that, 9 weapons shipments arrived in Central African Republic. Interest in the country has focused on exploring its natural resources on a concession basis. The murder of 3 Russian journalists in a remote area of the country last year focused on the world's attention on what it looked like a Kremlin drive for influence and resources. Russia is the second largest exporter of arms globally and a major supplier to African states. Over the past 2 decades, it has pursued military ties with various African countries such as Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. Military ties are linked to bilateral military agreements as well as providing boots on the ground in UN peacekeeping operations. Combined, China and Russia outnumber the other permanent members of the United Nations Security Council in contributing troops to the United Nations peacekeeping efforts. Russia has also been actively supporting Zimbabwe. Shortly after it was reported in 2018 that China had placed new generation surface-to-air missiles in Zimbabwe, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that his country was pursuing military cooperation. Significantly, Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa has said that his country may need Russia's help with modernization of its defense force during a recent visit to Moscow. Both Russia and China are keen to play a future role in Africa. The difference between these 2 major powers is that China forms part of the Asian regional economy. Regional economy. Sorry, this will surpass North Africa and Europe combined in terms of global power, based on GDP, population size, military spending, and technological investment. China and India have sustained impressive economic growth over many years, and their enormous populations make them 2 world powers of extraordinary importance. Growth prospects for the Russian economy, on the other hand, remain modest, between 1.5% to 1.8% a year for 2018 and 2010. Still, Russia remains a major power in global politics. For African leaders, the key word is agency, and the question is how to play the renewed Russian attention to their countries advantage and not to fall victim to the contemporary geopolitical chess game played by the major powers on the continent. So Russia is here.
Okay, so we always say you only have permanent interests and limited friends. You make deals per your interests. And with Russia and Africa in these multiple countries, do you think these African? This is the question to the panel. Do you think African leaders are putting their interests first and getting the most out of these deals as they can with Russia?
You want to answer that, Paul?
I get asked this question a lot, and I see it a lot in many different circles. And I'm a firm belief that most Black Americans do not have anywhere near the depth of information that they need to answer this question properly. All right. It is not that African leaders don't have a spine or they need to do things for their people or they're not. Why are they making these deals? You have to understand something. And I quote Thabo Mbeki years ago. You cannot understand how it feels as a grown man and as a leader of a nation state to go before European powers with your hat in hand, begging for help to feed your own people. Okay? So yes, China is on Africa. Yes, Russia is in Africa. Yes, many of these African nation states have natural resources, but they have no leverage. Okay, that is yes, you have to get the resources out of the ground. Yes, but you're you're the head of an African state. You can't feed your own people. Black people in America do not understand the monumental challenge of the lack of infrastructure in Africa. Okay, so they have to make these infrastructure deals with these foreign nation states. They have to make deals for new technology development and irrigation and uh, tech. So these African leaders are they're in an extremely weak position. Yes, they have something that these foreign states want, but they have nothing else other than that. They do not have the infrastructure. They do not have the education, do not have the technology, do not have the medicine. So they really have nothing to bargain with. In fact, the leaders of these African nation states, they themselves do not even have the ability or the capability to mine and exploit their very own resources. Okay? So when if you have something that I want, but you don't even have the ability to give it to me, I hold all the cards. Okay, and that is what a lot of people fail to realize. States like Russia, states like China, they hold all the cards. That's the problem. So it's not that African leaders need to grow a spine and they need to make deals in their best interest. They literally cannot. They're in between a rock and a hard place. Now they can let pride govern their actions, but then their people will continue to starve, and then they will more than likely face the end of a gun barrel themselves. Okay, so what I'm of the opinion, it would be in the best interest of the leaders of these African states, as these deals are made, to make an all-out push to develop as much intellectual capital within their own citizens, to learn as much as possible, so that their own citizens can then take over these roles and then create their own tech, create their own infrastructure. All right. We're seeing African startups. We're seeing Africa becoming a hotbed for blockchain and other technologies. That needs to be of equal investment into the infrastructure that Africa desperately needs.
Hmm.
That's my take.
Point taken. And I agree with developing as much intellectual, uh, um, a large pool of intellect as possible. if you say, well, we don't have the intellect to get these resources out the ground, therefore you can get them, but you have to also train X amount of our people to learn how to do this. On top of learning what skills and machinery needs to be built to do this, I am for that.
which is exactly my point. Which is exactly my point. Because that is what I feel. That's what I feel the focus needs to be. So if you are the head of a particular African state, you're going to make a deal that heavily favors Russia, heavily favors China. But while doing so, you make it known from the highest level down to the individual on the ground. Learn everything you can, soak everything up, because our goal is we want to be the ones learning this. We want to be the ones operating this machinery, designing the machinery, creating the machinery, engineering the machinery, creating our own technical schools, our own engineering schools, designing our own blockchain, creating our own apps. And we need to be the ones doing it. Okay, so that would be my take if I were one of these African heads of state. But understand something. Even while doing that, they will still be subject to these grossly unbalanced trade deals. You have to understand, specifically amongst American black people, you have to understand that is the reality on the ground in Africa. That's the reality. Okay, it has nothing to do with lacking a spine. That's a very romantic, but also grossly incorrect notion. And I don't direct that towards you, Lionel. I direct that towards a large amount of American black people who do not fully understand the situation on the ground in Africa. Mostly because one, they haven't been there, and two, they're not looking toward the proper resources to gain information and educate themselves as to what's happening on the ground there.
I also echo what you said, Paul. And the thing is, I think when black people look at this, they just like they think that there's a cowardice amongst African leadership, but the reality is, um, most black people don't understand the political structures of Africa and the the because they're comparing it to Western political infrastructure, and that's not the same. It's not as bureaucratic, so to speak. I mean, here you have a total political structure because it was built. That's where the country is built from the ground up. Most of these countries are coming out of colonialism and came out of civil wars and have pretty much burned, lost a lot of their intellectual capacity to actually to thrive and their agricultural capacity as well. So it's a multi-part issue that I don't think most African Americans really understand. But when I see Russia and Africa, and I see the endeavors that they're tied into, which is something I didn't even know. I didn't know they was involved in that many countries. I thought that they were only involved in Libya and in Egypt. But looking at the amount of countries that they're invested into, I think we can actually learn something from that as to what can we bring to the table that would actually be beneficial to the continent in some areas of the regions, and how do we so I agree with your points.
Also, I hate I I hate to sound like I'm beating a dead horse because I feel like I say this at least once every single hangout. People cannot underestimate the influence of the CIA and MI6. They are there. They have an active hand and active role in almost every single African nation there. At least the ones that they feel that America and the UK feel could form any kind of a threat, or at least a threat to what are their perceived interests. All right. And that is classic Monroe Doctrine thinking, which again is classic UK Crown thinking. It is better to deal with a weakened and destabilized nation than it is to deal with a equal power. All right. If you look at the names Patrice Lumumba, okay, just to name one, Nelson Mandela, Kwame Nkrumah. Yeah, I can go on and on and on. All right, where you have MI6 and CIA with their hands all over removing African leaders from power, including Hosni Mubarak and Anwar Sadat. So there's always that as well. So if you are the leader of an African state, all right, you literally can't even feed your own people. You do not have the intellectual wherewithal to remove your own natural resources. On top of which, you always have to look out for the CIA and MI6 training and arming people who would remove you from power. But then, at the very same token, you have to sit down at political functions and actually do political deals with these two very same nations. Okay, that's a much different geopolitical ball game than the one most American black people would like to think the reality is.
Mhm. All right, let's move on to the next video or next item on the docket. Sorry. All right, this one is a video from Russian Insight. Watch Russian Su-27 fend off F-15 in a daring maneuver mid-air. A Su-27 jet was filmed confronting a F-15 as it fended off the U.S.-made aircraft by executing a risky maneuver mid-air while both planes flew very close to each other. Let's see that again. I want to say that was a NATO warplane. Interesting that it chased it off, though.
Russia's air military technology has been every bit as equal, if not superior, in several ways to American fighter jet technology. The reality is, the Soviet Union was not the threat that the U.S. media portrayed it to be. The Soviet Union lacked the resources to build them in large numbers. But the Sukhois and the MiGs, the 29 and the 30, the 31, were superior to anything that the U.S. had. And that Su-27 was as equal to, if not superior, than the F-22 Raptor. In fact, the F-18 was inspired by a MiG. The F-22 Raptor was inspired by the Sukhoi with the thrust vector nozzles and the idea of putting real world stealth technology into fighter jets. Russia still lacked
Hmm.
the resources to build them in large numbers. Okay, but MiG and Sukhoi, who the Russian government have actually now merged, so they're actually now one company as opposed to two. But they were superior in many ways to anything that the U.S. had, and that has been a major sore spot to the U.S. for decades.
All right. All right, this next one is from FoxNews.com. Navy builds two new large surface attack drone ships. It's a DARPA image of a drone ship vessel called the Sea Hunter. The Navy is building two large drone ships to coordinate synchronized attacks, perform, perform command and control across fleets of unmanned surface vessels, and conduct high-risk maritime missions such as anti-submarine operations, mine countermeasures, surface warfare, and forward deployed surveillance. The new vessels, now in the early stages of conceptual development, are intended to perform both manned and unmanned operations while networked to a smaller fleet of multi mission USVs. Captain Pete Small, Program Manager, Unmanned Maritime Systems Naval Sea Systems Command, told reporters at a Surface Naval Association symposium. I don't understand why I have to put this guy's whole entire title there. Quote, we are integrating large USVs, LUSVs, and medium USVs, MUSVs, into architecture as a large part of the future surface combatant force. We are developing single integrated combat systems shared across the entire combat portfolio, Small said. While the Navy is now exploring arming maritime drones with weapons, Small Small explained that the initial focus for the new larger surface drones will be autonomy, endurance, precision navigation, and command and control. Autonomy and human-led command and control systems form the basis of the Navy's rapidly evolving multi-year Ghost Fleet project to engineer a fleet of coordinated, interoperable surface drones to share time-sensitive combat information in real time across the force. In development now for many years by Office of Naval and Research and Naval Sea Systems Command, Ghost Fleet is engineered to leverage the most advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies available. The intent is to enable swarms of synchronized drones to capture, organize, and disseminate key targeting and sensor data, such as location of mines, submarines, surface vessels, and incoming enemy attacks. Um, I don't know, man. After that Zimmerwald debacle, I don't know if I really trust, you know, anybody building any sort of autonomous unmanned surface vehicles, and as well as using artificial intelligence and machine learning.
I
Why
was
do you need machine learning?
I was as much as we talk about autonomy taking over jobs, it sounds like autonomy taking over military positions. It sounds good, I would say, using autonomous um, machinery to do the things that they're talking about doing. Obviously, we read cases where it didn't go so well, it backfired, and so forth. I think it still can work. The more they go through it and work out the bugs and flaws and so forth, I my takeaway from what I just said is it sounds good. The in theory it sounds great.
Paul Bryant?
They spent $1 billion or $1.3 billion on the Zimwalt, and it doesn't even work.
Hmm.
The thing made it through sea trials, it made it through its shakedown cruise, but it still doesn't work. No, I'm sorry, it never made it through the shakedown cruise because it had to be towed back to port twice, which is why it's still not even in operation. It was commissioned, but it's not in operation. And I read an article that the Navy is building, or they're almost about to finish the second one, but the first
Well,
one doesn't even work. I don't understand that. Now, as far as these drone ships, I first read about this in 1981 in Popular Mechanics, which was the same issue I first read about the stealth bomber, or the stealth fighter. So my point is, on one hand, I see that as a program that's literally been decades in development. I'm just surprised that they're admitting to it now. because it's really nothing new. But by the same token, the Zumwalt doesn't work. Then they had this new Ford carrier. It it finished sea trials. It was commissioned. It went on its first shakedown cruise and had to come back to port because many of its brand new technologies don't work either. So I don't know what's really going on with the Navy's new Century surface fleet right now.
Yeah, they actually ordered 32 of those Zumwalt class destroyers, and they only got 4 of them. And the ones that you do see are the only ones that were actually manufactured. The rest of them were never manufactured.
Yeah, I mean, listen, whenever you have a brand new ship, the first one tends to eat up the bulk of the R&D budget. I get that. But you would think if you're going to spend over $1 billion for a project that you ordered 32, then you only end up with 4, and then the first one doesn't even work.
Hmm.
It's not even operational. Every time it goes out, it literally has to be towed back to port. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of any of this because then I also have to remember that in addition to the official black budget, there's also a large part of the black budget that gets hidden within everything else. So I don't know.
All right, this next one is from BusinessInsider.com. U.S. military suicide rates for active duty troops near record highs in 2018. The U.S. military finished 2018 with troubling um, statistic. It experienced the highest number of suicide among active duty personnel in at least 6 years. Without the Army reporting the number of soldiers who died by suicide in the last quarter of 2018, a total of 286 active duty members took their lives during the war, including 57 Marines, 68 sailors, 58 airmen, and through through October 1st, 103 Army soldiers. The deaths equaled the total number of active duty personnel who died in suicide in 2017. With the Army's fourth quarter data could reach could reach the record 321 suicides recorded in 2012. Suicide continues to be a present to present a challenge to the Pentagon and the military services, which have instituted numerous programs to save lives, raise awareness, and promote prevention. Marine Corps Commandment, Marine Corps Commandant General Robert Neller, in his 2019 guidance to Marines released Friday, urged them to consider the lasting impact that a quote permanent solution to a temporary problem can have. Quote, we pride ourselves on building tough, resilient, mission focused Marines, but we also pride ourselves on taking care of our own. While there is no dishonor in coming up short or needing help, there is no honor in quitting. Marines never quit on each other, Nella wrote. The Corps' 57 active duty deaths represent a 25% increase from 2017, the highest number of suicides since the service began closely tracking them in 2001. The Corps also lost 18 reserve members in 2018 to suicide, second only to 2016 when 19 Marines reservists took their own lives. The service began tracking reserve in 12 Navy suicides, 68 sailors in 2018, up from 65 in 2017, and marked a steep increase in the active duty Navy personnel. Just 5 years ago, when the suicides among active duty sailors, the suicide rate was 12 per 100,000 sailors. Now the rate is per 100,000. The Navy is the only service that publishes its data, including mine. According to the Air Force officials, 58 active duty airmen took their lives while 3 reserve members died by their own hands. The number represents a decline from previous years, down from 63 in 2015 and 2017 and 61 in 2016, but it's still troubling, said Brigadier General Michael Martin, Director of Air Force Integrated Resilience. What do you think about this, Lino?
I can almost guarantee you that many of those people that took their lives really did not have anything to do with what went on the battlefield, because you're always going to have people that experience such extreme levels of PTSD or such high levels of PTSD that they can't cope when they get home. Those, sad to say, but those people who fall through the cracks. They don't go to um, what you call uh, help conferences, circles, would like people to help bring them out of their depression. You're always going to have that, but the increase, I can almost guarantee say it has something to do with what they experienced when they got home, divorce, um, feeling the country don't care about them. When you get home, you got no job. You hooked on drugs, alcohol. Now, people can say, well, you don't hear about other countries such as Iraq, Iran. All these other countries who have militaries. One thing I can say, when those people that fight in these prolonged battles and wars, they have they have family. It's more family oriented. They have large extended families that they can occupy their time, help them out, and so forth. In America, it's a rugged individual mindset. It's well, I could do everything by myself. I could do this because I'm a man, and so forth. And you hear when you were in the Navy. Well, when I was in the Navy, you constantly heard stories where a guy go out 6 months later, his wife 3 months pregnant, or when he get back home, everything is gone. Me as a Navy personnel went through a divorce. They don't care if you, um,
Jody,
huh? Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
Jody.
yeah. Johnny Taylor, Jody got your girl and gone. Um, they don't care if you're in the military. They're gonna rob you. You feel as a veteran you do not get respect. You don't get preferential treatment. Say, hey, we know you're a veteran. We know that you put your life on the line for whatever. We're gonna look more in this situation for you.
Um, I did not serve in the military. My father did. He fought in the Korean War. My grandfather did. He fought over in Europe and Italy and Africa in World War II. My brother did serve in the military. He was in the Marine Corps, Force Recon, Special Forces. The person who I grew up with, who I knew my whole life, that guy never came back. Somebody else came back. He seems pretty well adjusted now. He's even living better financially than I am. That's another story. Problem is, every military on this earth has suicide rates. The United States has the largest military. The United States is the media capital of the world, so you hear about it here. This is a problem common to every military. Everything that Lionel touched on is a common theme, and I hear from my brother who has PTSD, his buddies who he served with during the first Gulf War, and others. They all say the same thing. If you had issues going in, they're going to be exponentially magnified when you come home. So it's not about the military service itself. And you know what? Veterans are not respected at all. And there are serious mental health issues that need to be addressed that are not addressed. So, me personally, myself, I have the utmost respect for the military. They literally put their life on the line every day to protect us. How they're used by the government, that's a different argument entirely. But the way that I see it, These veterans deserve the proper mental health that they do not receive, that they should be getting.
Yeah, Israel actually has a high suicide rate after every time they go into Gaza. So a lot of Israeli soldiers who were in infantry um, don't usually make it throughout the year because of the things that they've been commanded to do if they make it out alive from the Gaza Strip. Um, and a lot of those ones who are in infantry on the front line actually are dual citizenship with the United States as well as other countries in the European Union. So what's happening is, at least for other countries, is that these soldiers are being subjected to um, missions that are not consistent with their religious values or their personal values. So once they go out there, they like, you want me to kill a child? Well, I don't know if I can do that, and then you have to do it. Then they come home and then like, I don't know if I can how much I can stomach, and that indigestion leads to a bullet to the head or some other form of self harm. So
You know,
uh, go ahead.
I can speak to American servicemen on my job, out of my job, in a professional capacity, in a casual capacity, who does volunteer stories, how as U.S. servicemen dragging families out in front of villagers and executing them,
Mhm.
using public places of fresh water sources to use that for urination and defecation, and things that get worse from there, things that the U.S. military will absolutely deny, but happen. So as they say, war is hell, and you would not believe the things that go on over there. And I've heard this from people who served in the first Gulf War, second Gulf War, the other campaigns. So as you say, there's a lot that U.S. Servicemen do that never makes the news. People have no clue what they're ordered to do.
Right, and I agree. War is hell. War is not some fantasy, final fantasy. Okay, you hit me, I hit you. It's my turn. No, it's not that. There's no rules. No matter what these international rules of warfare or engagement are, when it come down to the come down, there are no rules. People are the the goal is not for you to say, well, I'm willing to die, blah blah blah. The goal is for you to get the other guy to kill himself for you to win. And they'll tell you that when you go in. You have people that, yeah, I joined the military because I'm willing to die for my country. And they'll tell you that's not the goal. The goal is to have the other people die as much as possible for you to win. That's the goal. And when these women say, oh, women, they're fighting for women to join these combat forces, they're fighting for women to join the ranks of this hell, you don't know what you're doing. You're you're psychopathic in thinking that you're willing to fight to put women on these front lines and willing to fight for them to go into hell. And when they come back home, either get raped there, don't get captured. You're gonna get raped. You're gonna get killed. And it's a high probability. There's a high probability that when you come home, you're gonna kill yourself. And unable to have kids, and unable to have a steady a family life. I don't think people understand what this isn't the movies. I don't think people understand what all this entails. Even me, every now and then, I wake up at night screaming for help. I don't know why. I just don't know. I don't know what I was thinking about, what dreaming about when I was asleep for me to do that.
Now,
People,
does your Google Home says okay, Lionel?
no, no, I have to say, okay, Google, help. That's a good one. That's a good one. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard, man.
Mr. DE, what's going on, brother?
Good evening, everybody.
What's
I'm
going on? How
okay,
you
man.
doing?
Good
What's
evening.
going on?
Kind of raining and cold in Florida tonight.
Wow.
You have anything you want to add to this discussion?
Yeah, I understand what Linnell was saying. I got an uncle. Right, I had two uncles who one was in Vietnam and one was in Korea. And the one that's Vietnam right now, he can never be whole again. He's the one who warned me because I was supposed to go fly helicopters. He told me helicopter pilots last 6 months, and that's what sent me to the Air Force instead of going to the Army.
Mm.
So I was due to go to Vietnam, but I didn't become a helicopter pilot. And the Army recruiter wasn't happy.
You know, every person who's in the Marine Corps who I've ever known, they all say Vietnam was unlike any other war that America ever fought. Any person, the guys who fought in the Vietnam War, they saw things that human beings should not see. And I met, I met, I worked with a guy when I was 19 who was in Vietnam who did the same thing that my brother did, Marine Force Recon, Special Forces. And the things that he would say, he wouldn't give us war stories, but some of the things that he would say when he let something slip out every now and again would give Stephen King nightmares. The things that he saw, the things that the Viet Cong did, the things that they did, the things that the Marines did, things that the Army did. So war is not glorious. It is not about glory and fame. War is hell. War is absolutely hell. There is nothing good about it. And the PTSD, and I've I've seen it manifest in many different people in many different ways, and it leaves a lasting impact. And I will say this: the guy who I met, who was in fact, every person who I've ever met, all said the same thing that my brother said. Once you take another human life, it changes you forever. And he said, every life you take after that, a piece of you dies also. And my brother was a sniper in special forces. So let's just suffice it to say he engaged probably a whole hell of a lot more targets than the average person did. And that's why I say, person who I grew up with, he never came back. He stayed over there in the Gulf.
Mhm.
The guy who came back is a different person.
Uh, Lionel brought up a point. He said, you would have to be psychopathic to, to stick those women out there and things like that, and actually want to go out there and do the things that you think you're going to do. Well, you have to keep in mind that white supremacy is pretty psychopathic in itself.
Like, okay, here's this story. During the first Gulf War, you're in the middle of the desert. Desert Shield was, what, 6 to 8 months build up before the actual war started.
Hmm.
So, female service members, they used to literally prostitute themselves. Like, they get together, five of them, 10 of them, 20 of them, and just sell their body straight up. Because here you are, you've been in the desert for months. You you can't even sniff a pair of panties, and all you see are these American women in the U.S. military. They were straight up prostituting themselves. Now,
Yep.
Who's ever heard that story? Or
I've I've seen it.
okay, they
But why,
thank you
why, why would they do that if they're already getting paid going in? They already get their $5,000 bonus, right?
I don't know.
because they could literally charge whatever they want. Because if you're there and you're a U.S. male service member, you literally have no idea when you're going home. So whatever money you have nothing to spend it on. Okay, you're living in your tank, in your APC, on your base, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert. So that you have nothing to spend your money on. So if these women say, "Listen, give me $500 for this, $1,000 for that," they would give it up
Yep.
Where, they,
straight up.
now, where do these guys get the money from? You're in the middle of the desert. You ain't got no money in your pocket.
There's
Ah,
ways.
here's what.
There's ways, man.
Thank you.
There's
Thank you.
and what Paul said when people I want to well not correct him but correct people who think they they know what he said. He didn't say they're being prostituted as if someone is making them do it. No, they
Mm-mm.
prostitute themselves out.
Yes.
They do it themselves consciously.
Mm-hmm. Think about that. They did it themselves. It was their idea. They would get together, five, 10 of them in a group, sometimes more, and do it themselves.
Thought
No,
Yeah.
pack,
correct,
thought brigade.
correct. And there's also something that when it makes the news, it gets shouted down immediately. It's a story you hear in the news for maybe 1 or 2 days.
Mhm.
There is, there is a rape culture in the military, and it's very real in every branch. So now you really want women serving in combat units? Hell, the United States Navy in 2018 started putting women to serve on submarines.
We were just
Mm.
talking about that
Yeah.
last week on the about Hunter Killer on the
Yeah.
last Geopolitics hangout.
That is
Yeah.
an absolutely insane
Right.
idea.
Hey, Paul. I served
Ins-
on submarines. There was no when I served. There were no women on submarines.
exactly, and there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. You
If
don't. You're not going nowhere. You're not going nowhere. Is no one to call? Nothing. You better sit
Well,
there and do your job.
if you got to deal with the Russian B submarines and you're trying to keep quiet, she she gonna give you all away. A fucking
Right.
torpedo gonna take ass right out in the water.
I mean,
I
hey man, listen. Unless things have changed since the early 2000s, hunter killers go out for 3 to 5 months straight, and boomers go out for 5 to 6 months straight.
other way
Months.
around. Other
Oh, other way around. Okay.
yeah. Fast
All
attacks
right.
go out to six. Fast attacks do the 6 months. The
Okay.
boomers go out to they 3 months in the water, 5 knots to nowhere.
Okay. So now again, 3 months in the middle of nowhere. All you have is the routine where there's zero room to move around. Anyone who doesn't believe or know what I'm saying, look up the videos for yourselves. And if you're on a hunter killer, 6 months, 6 months, and you want women in that environment, I don't know what the U.S. Navy is thinking. I don't know who smoked more crack, the admiral who okayed that, or the female officers who volunteered for the duty.
Or Marion Barry.
Well, Paul, you got there's something that you're not seeing is that the culture wants it that way. Women who really, um, you got people like say, not. I'm not saying that she specifically gave you the orders, but Hillary Clinton and the people who are hell bent on women being 90% of the rulership of the country. They're the people pushing this thing, and the generals don't really have a say as far as saying, "Well, we are going to do it, and we're not going to do it." They just have to implement whatever they're told to do. And you said something about the military being a rape culture, but I wouldn't put it as a rape culture because yes, rapes do take place, but the women who you're talking about, when I've seen it, I have seen it up front.
And you were in
The
the Air
women
Force
that
as
you're
well,
talking
women.
about,
Well,
sorry,
I,
the
I,
women that
I
you're
heard,
talking about, they give up this thing. You gotta understand that women sexually are, shoot, if not as equal to or more promiscuous than than men.
absolutely, and I don't mean to imply, or I didn't mean to say that that is the culture of the military. No, what I'm saying is there is an undertone within the military that exists. It is not the it is not the overarching, purveying culture of the military. That's not what I'm saying or what I mean to say. What I mean to say is it is a very real culture that does. It's a subculture that exists within the military.
Oh yeah, it's like if you were say you were on the base and like me, I was single. So they used to send me most of the time. Anytime I want to go, anytime they had to go like some kind of exercise or special operation, since I was a single guy, I went because the married guys don't want to go anywhere because
Hmm.
they know what happens when they leave home.
Mm. Jody's waiting at home.
Yep. And on top of that, if your wife at home wants to get a divorce, you SOL.
And also think about this. Think about this. If you serve on a carrier and when you deploy for 6 to 8 months, God forbid, straight, and you serve on a hunter killer sub and you're deployed for 6 months straight, she's a woman. What do you think is going to happen when she knows you're away for 6 months? At some point, that vibrator just ain't getting it done. Okay? And that's as graphic as I'll go with that. But I say all that to say I will leave the conversation right here so that Mike can move on to the next article.
Thank you. All right, this next one is from Business Insider. U.S. warships just challenged China with South China Sea sail by operation, and Beijing is furious. The U.S. Navy sent two guided missile destroyers to challenge China in the South China Sea, and Beijing is outraged. Two Arleigh Burke class destroyers two Arleigh Burke class destroyers, the USS Sprun, Sprunance and
Spruance.
Spruance and the USS Preble, conducted a freedom of navigation operation on Monday, sailing with 12 nautical miles of Chinese outposts in the contested Spratly Islands. The purpose was to quote to challenge excessive maritime claims and preserve access to the waterways, as well as to show that the U.S. will fly, sail, operate wherever international law allows. Commander Clay Doss, a U.S. Navy 7th Fleet spokesman, told CNN. Beijing sharply criticized the operation. A spokeswoman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wai Chungying, accused the U.S. of entering Chinese waters without permission and engaging in provocations that threaten China's sovereignty, the South China Morning Post reported. China's claims to the South China Sea were largely discredited by an international arbitration tribunal 3 years ago. Beijing rejected the ruling and the authority of the tribunal. The Chinese military has since bolstered its presence in the region through deploying surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, jamming technology, and other defense systems to Chinese occupied territories. Monday sailed by is the second U.S. freedom of navigation operation in South China Sea this year. In January, the destroyer USS McCampbell challenged China's claims to the Parcel Islands. China then accused the U.S. of trespassing, and Chinese media announced it had deployed a, quote, far-reaching anti-ship ballistic missile, the DF-26, that was capable of targeting medium and large ships. What do you guys think about this? China's a little upset. Where's Scholar Chang?
America keep messing with people. I saw some on RT today, and they show how thin America's military is, how many countries we're in, and so forth. The military is too thin to fight short of pulling people out of the 76 some odd countries we're in. They'll have military bases in, and the military is too thin to fight a real war with a country on their own turf.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some strategic goings on here that we're not privy to, but I don't. America can't go out and fight a war with China right now.
Uh, I don't know. America normally doesn't. Well, Vietnam and Korea were hmm, I don't know. America normally doesn't fight wars. They test equipment. That's the way I see. I am not kidding you. I see it that way. The U.S. develop military hardware and then they test it somewhere. if you see what happened in the Middle East, what they call the Middle East in Iraq, they
Hmm.
were testing bombing. They were testing the ship, the helicopters. All these were was new equipment that they made after after sorry after Vietnam,
Hmm.
and they were testing them because U.S. never fought a war in a desert.
Right.
And if you see when they first went into Iraq, what happened to the military equipment that they took there? I mean, it almost became useless. So after they came out of Iraq, they learned how to operate in that atmosphere using the military equipment. They made all the adjustments that they need to make it to operate in that kind of um,
Theater.
theater. Yes.
Yeah, I've heard about that in the invasion of Panama. That many of the doctors, the Cuban doctors who went down there, and other doctors from other countries said they had saw wounds on civilians that they had never seen before. And a lot of civilians were complaining that they were getting burned by these red lights. If that makes any sense to anybody on the panel, they were seeing red lights um, from U.S. military, and then their skin started burning. And a lot of doctors didn't know how to treat it because they had never seen anything like that before.
Well, there are two things that can do something like that: lasers and well, it's the same thing. High frequency sound, because high frequency sound can actually burn you. It's like a radar burn.
which is exactly something that the U.S. Army was developing in the 70s and 80s. All right. And that's what you saw in Cuba 2014, 2015, when those I think it was Cuban officials or Russian officials claimed that the CIA or the U.S. used some unseen weapon to make them sick or to hurt them. Now, there, there were high frequency sound wave weapons that the Army developed in the 80s that would literally destroy tanks, destroy armored vehicles and APCs and Jeeps. The Army claimed that they weren't viable and they never used them. Apparently, that was a lie because we all know that the U.S. military never lies, right? But
Mm.
um, I see this as a lot of saber rattling, and until I see something substantial happen, I pay it zero mind. I really do. So, and as DE said, the U.S. military is constantly creating new technologies, and once they develop it, then they're looking for the first theater of combat to test it. You know, the Abrams tank and the Apache. As you said, when they first went over to the first Gulf War, the first 1,000 Apaches they sent over there within a week, 300 of them were grounded until they developed better air intakes for the turbines. Same thing for the Abrams because they're both powered by turbines, which is basically a smaller jet engine. So when I look at the numerous technologies that the DoD has been developing since, they're just they're waiting for the next theater of combat to test these weapon systems because that's basically the lesson learned from World War II to be in front of the curve. They don't ever want to be in a situation where they're on equal footing with other powers and then it's a race between industrial prowess to get something out. The U.S. military mindset is to be ahead of that curve.
I know.
No other comments.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. Then. All right, next one is from NewYorkTimes.com. Trump signs executive order promoting artificial intelligence. President Trump signed an executive order Monday meant to spur the development and regulation of artificial intelligence technology that many experts believe will define the future of everything from consumer products to healthcare to warfare. Artificial intelligence experts across the industry, academia, and government have long called on the Trump administration to make development of artificial intelligence a major priority. Last spring, worried that the United States was not keeping pace with China and other countries, Jim Mattis, the the then defense secretary, sent a memo to the White House imploring to the president of to the president to create a national strategy on artificial intelligence. Now, Mr. Trump has taken that step through this quote American Artificial Intelligence Initiative. Might not be as bold as some had hoped. The executive order aimed to better educate workers in the field, improve access to the cloud computing services and data needed to build AI systems, and promote cooperation with foreign powers. But the order did not set aside funds for AI research and deployment or development, and the administration provided few details on how it planned to put its new policies into effect. The United States is engaged in increasingly bitter trade war with China, and while American companies like Google and Amazon are now leaders in AI, experts in the field are concerned that China could surpass the United States in the development of the technologies that will power surveillance systems and autonomous weapons, as well as driverless cars and a wide range of internet service. In July 2017, Chinese unveiled, should be saying China, Chinese unveiled a plan to become the world leader in AI, aiming to create industry worth $150 billion to its economy by 2030. And two Chinese cities promised to invest $7 billion in the effort. Other governments, too, began making large investments, including South Korea, Britain, France, and Canada. In the United States, the Defense Department has accelerated efforts to embrace AI, shifting $75 million of its annual budget to a new office that will develop these technologies. Other government agencies also have major projects in the works. Many AI have experts have worried that the top talent in the United States is moving to companies like Google and Amazon and away from government agencies. Last year, these concerns increased when Google pulled out of a project to build artificial intelligence for the Pentagon after employees protested that the technology they were working on could be used for lethal purposes. Companies like Google are also expanding their operations in countries like China, France, and Canada as the AI talent in those countries continues to expand. This is interesting. I think there's a difference between the United States and other countries, primarily because um, other countries don't rely on private entities to actually drive their national interest. They actually kind of cultivate that in house, if that makes any sense. So there's no real initiative that needs to be. Their other countries' initiatives are really based on the domestic policies of the nation state itself, whereas in the United States they kind of rely on third party private industries to actually cater to their national interests, and it doesn't work that way. At least it doesn't work efficiently that way.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
You have anything you want to add?
None more than what you just read. Like you said, it's interesting that Trump um, signed it to push artificial intelligence. I'm pretty sure he sees the other countries of the world, or the notable countries of the world, such as Russia, and we all know what Putin said. In China, they're going, um, they're pushing toward artificial intelligence and this new fourth industrial revolution at a high rate comparable to America. So that sticks out to me.
DE, you have anything you want to add to this?
Oh, we've fallen behind. Well, we're not totally behind, but we've fallen behind China as far as this new technology is concerned. That's one of the reasons why you see the Huawei executive is in big hot water now with the U.S. But the U.S. is falling behind, and it's got to look like the president is leading. Because if you are in the medical field, you are some transcriber or nurse or somebody who does a lot of paperwork. Even doctors are going to be hurt by this artificial intelligence. So if you got like what 20, 30 million people in the medical field, and they're going to get displaced by this new technology, your congressman is worried. A lot of people are worried about 20 million people on the street. So the president now have to push the agenda to get um, things moving. And you see, he didn't put any money to it because the U.S. really don't have the type of money to put into a large scale uh, thing like China does. China can throw 100 billion in there, 200 billion, 500 billion, but the U.S. has to depend on GE or Google or whoever is in the private sector is going to do it. They got to do it, and the U.S. got to make it possible for them to do it. That's why you see the big tax break a lot of people got the other day. It had nothing to do with giving. They were trying to give them money to bring business back into the U.S. that they sent to China, which is China's doing the electronic stuff.
Yep. Yeah, Complex in the chat says Google and Amazon are government agencies, depending on how you look at it. Actually, that would not be the case. I mean, they were funded by the by U.S. government grants, but it's not the same as saying that they're government entities. Primarily because they operate in other countries and at their own interest. If it was to the benefit of the United States, it would include more higher paying jobs in their factories, and you don't see that. In fact, Amazon factories tend to have some of the worst reviews of any company I've ever seen. Come on.
How you doing today, D? I want to say what's going on to Abdul L in the chat, Nate, Complex. We hit a high viewing today. We got 24 likes, so hit the like button when you all come in. Paul Bryant just joined back. Jedi Focus, Super Triz, Afro Jam. Afro Jam, all right. Yeah.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, this one is from News.com. Venezuela military moves S-300 system in position to defend country. The Venezuelan military has reportedly moved their S-300 air defense system in position to defend the country, a new satellite image revealed on Thursday. According to the image revealed by Image Satellite International, the Venezuelan military moved their S-300 VM air defense system into position at the capital, at the Captain Manuel Rios air base. So this is, I guess, this is a satellite map here. If I can click on it. Interesting that whoever makes this decision was in full command to begin with, and it's happening under Maduro. So I don't see the opposition leader Juan Guaido, telling them to put those surface-to-air missiles back in the back in the tool shed. He hasn't said a peep about that.
Exactly, which is why when I hear certain people in certain sectors saying that the support for Guaido is stronger than people think, and Maduro does not have the support of the military, and he's hanging on by the skin of his teeth, I don't see that, especially when things like this point to the opposite.
Hmm.
Okay, Maduro, whatever the situation is in Venezuela, it does not. When something like this happens, it does not look tenuous. It seems to me as if the U.S. is trying to create something that hasn't taken hold yet.
Wow, this is something. He moved. Obviously, he think they're Venezuela is going to be attacked. Well, not attacked, but um, what's the word I'm looking for? Invaded by America because of what's going on outside of Venezuela, especially in Colombia and so forth. And with the coup, um, air quotes, taking America, pushing that coup of Guaido, he's preparing himself. He's not going to sit there on his hands and say, "Oh no, I'm not going to mind that." No, he going to make sure that he stays in power. And with these moving S-300s, if he's moving those, he's doing other things also. It's not those. He's not just moving those. So yeah, we see. We gonna see.
D.
I don't know. I think we're in a war of words, and everybody's pretty much chosen sides already. It appears that way. A lot of the people who are going to stay on the sidelines are actually on the sidelines, and the people who are going to say, we can't allow this to happen. I've already said we can't allow this to happen because before, while the U.S. used to do things and people would stay silent for fear, now people have learned to say, you know what? If we all say something together, if we all object together, then you know, our my turn might not be next, and
Hmm.
that's what's happening. But they have to prepare, even if even if they can't fight a war with the U.S., they still have to prepare because then it gets to the people. It's like if Russia was going to invade the United States government have to prepare Americans that if we fire off our missiles and the Russians still come, you guys have to fight. And that's what's happening in Venezuela. They say, look, if we fire off our missiles and the U.S. still come, we are still going to fight. And that's what Maduro is doing. He's leading what any leader should do.
Yeah, and they are training 50,000 of their own civilians. I don't know if you saw the videos recently. They gave pretty much all the civilians a AK-47 and sending them to the border, where the United States and Colombia military at the border. So they're waiting for them to come in.
You know, I personally I don't see the United States invading Venezuela. They need something. They need something for justification, even if it's flimsy and it's completely fabricated. Right?
Hmm.
This isn't the days of England when the British Empire was the most powerful empire in the world. Even the United States needed something. All right, listen, our ship was attacked and sunk. We're going to war. Um, our neighbor's sovereignty was taken over because this other nation went in, or this despot or this dictator took control of the nation's oil wells. So, in the name of freedom, mom, baseball, and apple pie, we're going in. Point is, short of something like that happening, I don't see the United States invading Venezuela. I really don't. Also, there's also the fact that as of right now, whether the United States businessmen are happy about it or not, whether their pockets are getting greased or not, 50% of America's oil still comes from Venezuela. So
Well, they
until
stopped those ships from coming in. I
so
don't know
there,
if you've seen the pictures. There's like a convoy of ships that have been halted by U.S. military, Coast Guard.
so where will the U.S. turn to get us off? Which before I the United States has more than enough proven oil reserves to self-supply. The United States chooses not to, but
Mhm.
so we'll see how this plays out.
I think they're just inspecting those ships because they're worried that maybe those ships do have some kind of launch capabilities on them. I know that that's always been a concern that a simple cargo ship with some shipping containers on them could actually hold quite a few ballistic missiles, because shipping containers are 53 feet in length, at best. For a maximum length, they are actually 53 feet. So you take a shipping container, you take about 12 or 13 of them, or a dozen of them, and you put some heavy armaments on, not a heavy armament, but a warhead on there. Uh, you can get off about 2 dozen ballistic missiles into the United States through a cargo ship.
Very true. Very true. A full-sized can, as we call them, yeah, they're pretty long. So
Hmm.
you make an excellent point. But you know what? I say this, as I said with several articles earlier this hangout. Until I see something of substance happen, I don't take any of it that seriously.
Hmm.
It's just more public consumption, fear mongering, saber rattling, the global boogeyman syndrome. Until I see until I see American boots on the ground firing shots, I don't believe any of it. I just don't.
You're an optimistic man there, Paul.
I'm a realistic man. Because at the end of the day, when he talks BS walks, same thing for bullets, missiles, and jets. Until U.S. until I see U.S. soldiers in theater conducting offensive operations, I don't believe any of it.
All right, this one is from truthout.org. Venezuela accuses U.S. of secretly shipping arms after weapons found on plane. A North Carolina-based air freight company has halted flights to Venezuela following a report by McClatchy linking it to possible arms smuggling last week. Venezuelan authorities claimed that it had uncovered 19 assault weapons, 118 ammunition cartridges, and 90 military-grade radio antennas on board a U.S.-owned plane that had flown from Miami to Valencia, Venezuela's third largest city. The Boeing 767 is owned by a company called 21 Air, based in Greensboro, North Carolina. The plane had made nearly 40 round trips between Miami and spots in Venezuela and Colombia since January 11th, the day after Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was sworn in to a second term. The flights ended after McClatchy first reported on them. Venezuela accused the U.S. government of sending arms as part of its attempt attempt to topple the Maduro government. We speak to McClatchy reporter Tim Johnson, who broke the story. Johnson was part of a team that shared a 2017 Pulitzer Prize for an investigation of the Panama Papers. We turn to Venezuela, a North Carolina-based area. All right, this is just a transcript. So I don't know. They're finding all these guns and ammunition inside these ports.
Yeah, but Mike, 19 guns with six clips to each of those 19 guns. You're not saying or doing much. So either you're testing something on either end, you know?
That's just what they found. That's what the report is saying they found. But there's actually more. Um, I think it might be in this clip, but there's actually weapons caches being found all across the country that they
Mm,
that they hadn't seen before. These are American-made weapons too.
Right, because those kind of look like ARs. I could be wrong. Some either of you gents from the military may want to correct me.
Yeah, I think there were 6 Sawyers that they had found, but they can get those weapons from anywhere. There were weapon caches coming out of the Ukraine, being found in Syria. So um, there's a variety of places they can get these weapons. But the point of the matter is that they're finding these weapons caches all over the country.
Which is interesting because then that could be pointing towards the U.S. arming a militia on the ground, which is something that the U.S. has done before, which is what the U.S. did with the Sandinistas,
Hmm.
which is what the Green Berets do: train and arm militia on the ground. So something once again they learned from MI6.
Hmm.
So we've already seen President Trump trying to create a coup with this Guaido individual. So if the U.S. military is arming militia on the ground, because for all we know, the Green Berets are probably in country right now, training and slowly equipping a militia,
Hmm.
which is what the U.S. does. Standard textbook.
Go ahead, Mano.
Oh no, no, I was listening on this one. I wanted to get hear you all, so I comment on this one.
DE, you have anything you want to add to weapons caches being found across Venezuela? Multiple flights coming from
Yeah,
Miami.
I what Paul says is that was exactly what would normally be done. That's like he said. They used the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas did the same thing. The only thing they bought their weapons using money that they sold drugs in the black community to achieve. Now, you don't send in a whole lot of weapons, but I don't know if you remember the first um, big up little protest that the people who the U.S. are supporting down there. They said that army was shooting people while these guys were the ones shooting the people with the guns. How did they get the guns? Somebody gave them the guns,
Hmm.
and that's what you normally do. You would send in the guns like this. They come in aid packages. When the aid packages get distributed, um, the guns are probably guns that were bought somewhere and used by the Venezuelan army also. So
Hmm.
now you can say that the Venezuelan army are shooting people.
Right. Right. They can claim that the opposition is under attack and then that they need to arm the opposition.
Exactly. So either you send in the Green Berets to train the militia, which is exactly the only thing that the Green Berets do,
Hmm.
or you send in Force Recon or SEALs or um, Black Ops contractors, and you execute a false flag operation, which again the U.S. learned from MI6.
Well,
Net result is the same thing. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say that Elliot Abrams is the same guy from the 1980s that is here now.
Are you surprised that it is the exact program they ran against the Sandinistas?
Exactly. I mean, bro, these guys, listen, once something works, they don't change it until it proves that it no longer works.
Hmm.
All right. So we've seen this before. If you are an individual who studies geopolitics, which means you also have to study the machinations behind the scenes. You've seen this before. All the telltale signs, they're all there. You know, a one Colonel Oliver North broke every law on the U.S. Law books and got off scot free. Wrote a book and even got himself a television show, hailed as a hero. One Vice President Bush became president. So I learned in 1985 when I was watching that trial. I ran Contra trial live. It doesn't matter what you do, what laws you break. As long as you have friends in the right places, you will get off scot-free.
What they're trying to do is what they did in Syria as well, with arming the opposition, like what they consider to be the Kurds, right? So now Guaido's opposition becomes the Kurdish faction, and then they can go in there and try to support them politically. The only problem is that Mexico is not on board with this. So if Mexico is not on board with this, but Colombia is, now you're going to have a two spatting of two Latin American superpowers, or semi superpowers for that matter. I consider anybody who has an aircraft carrier a superpower, in my opinion. You don't project power. You don't have an aircraft carrier unless you plan on projecting power at some point. So it does sound like there could be some major fallout if they're gonna arm the opposition. And one of the guys did get caught. He was coming from Colombia. He was hiding in Colombia. They put a warrant out for him. He crossed right back into Venezuela the other day, and they caught him. And he already admitted. I think the video is on YouTube. He admitted on camera that he was working with the CIA to overthrow the Venezuelan government, and that there have been all these defectors who are working with the CIA as well. I think the video might just be on YouTube. I'll see if I can find it before the hangout is over. But it's an interesting pivotal point, because the Ukrainian sailors that were captured in December also said the same thing on camera when the Russians caught them. And
Right.
the video's on YouTube.
Right, and when I read this article, and they made mention of this 21 Air, the first thing that came to my mind was Air America.
Pan Am or Air America?
No, Air America. Okay, with the CIA's private mini airline to shuttle drugs and arms back and forth between the Central American countries. You know,
It's an umbrella company.
yes, because it was operated by the CIA.
Air
Plus,
America is not the only one. There's about 4 or 5 of them.
absolutely,
Yeah, it's got more airplanes than anybody else.
What is it?
absolutely.
What is it? Spirit Airlines?
Well, you know what? There are some circles that said that uh, believe it or not, Tyson Chicken also had a role in all of that, because Donald Tyson at one time owned the largest private air fleet in America, and he actually helped the CIA with that business of transporting drugs and arms back and forth between the Central American countries.
No wonder people got high when they ate that chicken.
And he was a personal friend of one William Jefferson Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
And then supposedly, I believe his name was Ron Brown, head of the Democratic National Committee, had some issue with that, and he was going to take that up with certain people, and that's why his plane went down when he was visiting troops. But
Oh yeah.
again, all unsubstantiated claims, but happened at the same exact time. A former Clinton associate was found having committed suicide with a bullet to the back of the brain, even though he was found face down. When it's scientifically proven that normally you fall backwards, not forward. But again, I digress.
Well, the Earth is flat. I mean, according to some people, so maybe the gravitational pull from that side of the Earth probably pulled them forward.
Right. Earth is flat, and it's surrounded by a 200-foot thick ice wall. NASA's fake, and no one's ever been in space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me get to this next article. This is the last article on the docket. Then we open up for open mic. This one is from NBCNews.com report. Space will likely be a battlefield in any U.S. conflict with China and Russia. Look at all these would-be satellites. A new U.S. intelligence report warns that both China and Russia are investing in weapons that could attack U.S. satellites and assets in space, and that both nations are now preparing to use space as a battlefield. We talked about this on Monday. Last month, the Defense Intelligence Agency released a report about China's military capabilities, warning that the Asian country was making advances in counter space technology that could threaten U.S. satellites responsible for communication, reconnaissance, GPS, and early warning of missile launches. But a new DIA report, quote, challenges to security in space, warns that both China and Russia are making advances in space technology, and that both are likely to likely to turn to space early on in major military conflict to cripple their adversaries. Quote, space is now a war-fighting domain like land, sea, and air, a U.S. defense official said. We can't view space as a sanctuary from attack. The U.S. military has grown increasingly reliant on space assets in recent years. It has communication satellites that provide internet and mobile services, reconnaissance satellites that enable signals intelligence and provide information on enemy force positions, as well as space-based sensors that alert the United States to missile launches and position, navigation and timing satellites that provide GPS to the military and to most Americans. Quote, the use of space has greatly expanded U.S. military ability to project power globally, a U.S. Defense Intelligence official said, adding they can do so with fewer troops deployed and therefore less risk to American service members. One common example is the use of drones, which rely on satellite signals to communicate. While China has demonstrated an anti-satellite missile and may have perfected a laser that could attack U.S. assets in space, Russia is still working to perfect those technologies and, according to the report, focusing heavily on direct energy weapons, usually lasers or high-powered microwaves that can disable or even destroy assets in space. This mobile ground-based weapon system, capable of destroying space targets, the report warns, is likely to be operational within the next several years. U.S. defense and intelligence officials say neither China nor Russia has surpassed the U.S. in space capabilities, but that they are investing broadly to try to best the American military, and that they are now integrating weapons that could attack in space into their conventional units. What concerns me the most is having a holistic force, the defense intelligence official said. We need to be postured to address these challenges, or we do risk losing advantages in space. What do you guys think about the new battlefield, Mr. DE? I'll start with you.
Well, they already told you we have microwave and laser weapons out there. That's what they're telling you. We already have it out there. And the Chinese and Russians are trying to catch up, and we can't let them catch up. So what are they going to do? You know, then that's the step. The next thing, the next step is Star Trek. Did you call it?
Hmm. Star Wars.
No, not Star Wars. Star Trek. Yeah.
You want to elaborate more?
What? Enterprise.
Phasers.
No. Enterprise, meaning ships.
Starship Enterprise.
Oh,
Enterprise.
space. Well, when I say spaceships, not like spaceships, but ships built for space war.
Yep. And I was reading it. Well, you read an article there the other day. You sent that article that I was reading about autonomous drones, and that's the place that you would put a drone.
Mm. The expanse, man. But I will say this: a while ago, we covered an article where Trump signed a space force, like a space force, to say, this is what America's going to be doing, and people laugh. People saying, "Oh, look at him, he's going crazy. He's talking about Star Wars or Space Force now." But those people don't understand what's going on. No, this is going to be a new battlefield, and like the article said, this is a new domain: land, sea, air, space. This is serious. This isn't some off the wall uh, stuff. No, this is serious business.
Mhm. Paul Bryant.
Well, the way the U.S. military works is this: special forces gets tech, special forces gets technology 10 years ahead of mainline military. Military gets technology 15 to 20 years ahead of the general public. Their Navy has admitted that the new Ford class aircraft carrier, first in its class, is the first U.S. Navy warship designed to support directed energy weapons, lasers or railguns or phasers or any other type. They're also saying they officially announced that they're planning on retrofitting other older surface class ships to support directed energy weapons. I remember in 1980 when he was elected, President Reagan, or I should say 81, his inauguration speech, when President Reagan said, we need to be in space and have energy weapons that can shoot down any Russian missiles. He said that in 1981. So I say all that to say I am a firm belief that some of these weapons in some form or another already exist. So now they're ready to bring them out to full deployment. Or that specific technology is still being kept secret, but there is a older technology which is what the public will be told about, which again is generally how these things work concerning the US military. But do not for one second think that what they're saying isn't accurate. Space will be the future. It will be the future battlefield, God forbid, for any conflict, and that it's a good old fashioned space race. Whereas before it was the first to get in orbit and get to the moon, now it's the first to militarize space and have a viable fleet of spaceships, which according to some circles the U.S. Navy already has, but that's unsubstantiated. So I'll leave that there. But since our drones do operate on GPS and satellites, then absolutely you want to protect those satellites and you want to put space-based defense platforms in orbit that can protect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that space is a little bit crowded right now. It's about 2,000 satellites up there, including your cube-based sats. So it's inevitable that if you try to use a laser to take down a potential adversary satellite, you may not hit the exact satellite because another satellite may be crossing in the same trajectory in that same path, and you can end up taking down inadvertently other people's satellites as well, or the nation state satellites, which can cause a lot more problems.
Well, they don't all orbit at the same exact distance, but you make a very good point. You make a very good point that I hadn't even
Well,
thought about.
right, right, and I'm just saying that those lasers, it's not like those lasers bend and get to their destination. It's all line of sight. So,
Right.
it, a lot of those satellites are actually in the same pathway, despite the fact that they may have some nominal distance in between each other. If that laser is pointed at one that's high up, what about the ones that are in the same path of it? They can't avoid that.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
And those could be major satellites too. You're talking about like TV broadcasting and Sirius XM. Who wants to go without their Sirius XM? I pay good money for that shit.
You damn right I do. Gotta have my Sirius XM, my XM comedy,
Hmm.
Joe Madison, the Black Eagle.
Foxhole.
That's right. Foxhole.
You gentlemen can bring up anything you want. This is open mic.
Um, I didn't want to go into it earlier because I wanted to stay on topic, but as regard to Iran possibly having any sort of capability to sink a U.S. aircraft carrier, whether they do or they don't, there is a very common theme that I hear when articles come up, and people say, "Oh,
Hmm.
America's done. America's crumbling. Their power's at an end, and they realize it." Well, let's let's pump the brakes on that because weakening and lessening is not crumbling. They're two very different things. What the Soviet Union was in 1990, that was crumbling. And that was after the Berlin Wall fell. 1990 was after the economic collapse. And then the very end of 1990 is when the Soviet Union fell and collapsed. That's crumbling. The United States is nowhere near that. The fear that existed globally to this 800-pound gorilla in the room, the U.S., it's lessened, clearly. It's weakened, clearly, but weakened does not mean weak. Lessened does not mean crumbling. So I understand, and that comes from this romantic notion that America's time is over and a certain ethnicity time and power is over. But understand something: we're a long ways away from any of those romantic notions happening. A long ways away. Okay, so I really think that people need to um, tone down that romantic notion and take a more realistic view to things of this nature. All right. And I would also like to say this. If you are a person who lives in this country, you have a vested interest in the wherewithal and well being of this country. Unless you possess the ability to literally hop on a plane tonight, Wednesday night, go to a foreign nation, set up shop, or hold yourself over while you're in the process of setting up shop, you have a vested interest in the well being of this country. So think about that the next time that romantic notion that America is crumbling um, crops up when articles such as the potential to maybe sink a U.S. carrier pops up. That's all.
I don't think that any, well, the Russians are not going to do it. The Chinese are not going to do it. Um, I don't think any nation on planet Earth would ever try actively. I mean, they would do what Iran said, but not actively try to attack a U.S. ship. I mean, not even a Coast Guard vessel. It would be suicide. It would be just plain stupid. It's like a man trying to walk up to the White House with a gun.
I don't think it's so much about them physically attacking anybody. None of those countries are going to launch a preemptive strike on the U.S. However, they'll let the U.S. get themselves into a position where they have no choice other than to launch their own preemptive strike, and then asymmetrical warfare will take place. And the United States is highly probable that they will lose going in. Um, because they spread too thin. I think somebody talked about that earlier, that they spread too thin. I think it might have been Lionel. Um, but what I'm saying here is uh, they may not be the hegemonic power that they used to be coming out of World War II. That may not be the case going forward. Despite all of their advancements in military achievements, it's not going to be transferable into anything else actionable because you can't even employ your own people on the ground within your own country. A lot of those jobs that you see now are going to be gone within the next calendar year, and even going forward before Trump leaves office. Um, those people will be unemployed. A large section of your base is going to be unemployed, and it's going to be political upheaval in your own country. So you won't have to worry about China or Russia, or anybody trying to attack you from the outside. You'll be having attacks from the inside. 95% of the 300 million registered guns in this country belong to white males. You have to actually deal with that before you start dealing with foreign entities and adversaries on a global scale.
Yeah, but You know, I, I definitely concur with some of what you said, but as far as the U.S. military being spread too thin, I am of the mindset that the U.S. military is no longer constructed to wage war primarily with boots on the ground. The U.S. military now is primarily constructed to wage war with Tomahawk cruise missiles, drones, fighter jets, and submarines, and that the boots on the ground are there to mop up after the bulk of the damage has been done. If we're talking full unrestricted warfare, and the U.S. really hasn't been engaged in full unrestricted warfare since the first Gulf War, which was a live fire exercise as opposed to an actual war. So I don't necessarily see that having boots on the ground spread too thin being that much of a major issue. As to the rest of what you said, you know what? I can't argue with it. I can't. There are so many political upheavals here in this country. On that, I agree with you totally. Um, that stat about the 300 million registered guns, you know, maybe again, just maybe I'm wrong. This is just my opinion. That's all, just my opinion. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the huge factor as some circles tend to think that it is. Because do not for one second doubt that the U.S. military won't follow orders. If they are ordered to put down U.S. citizens in the name of whatever because they've been ordered to, they will do so. So I don't care how many handguns and rifles that U.S. citizens own. A few jets flying overhead, raining down bombs and missiles, puts that threat to an end in literal seconds.
You
So
do
again,
you are you insinuating that the United States government would bomb its own citizens?
absolutely. Why not? Absolutely. If there's anything that history has shown us, any government throughout history will kill its own citizens to maintain power.
1860, 1860, what is it, 1860 to 65.
That was the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865,
Right.
1860 to 1864, whatever. But
Yep,
yeah,
it will happen. Believe
yeah,
me, the Civil War in the U.S. was just like that.
and
Half the country fought for the British.
right, and even when it's on smaller scales, if we look through history, every government has was absolutely willing to kill its own citizens to maintain power.
Moscow and
Especially,
Chechnya.
absolutely, Beijing, China. When I was in high school, that that image of that little girl in front of that tank that she was
Oh,
about to get run over is burned into my brain forever.
Tiananmen Square.
Tiananmen Square. I was in high school when that happened. Before the collapse of the Berlin Wall.
Okay, but I
So
don't think I wouldn't think I don't think they're gonna see what I'm seeing here is okay. You have some F-16 fighter jets scramble from Air National Guard, to launch a strike. But what happens when these other states decide that we're not in agreement with this, especially states like Texas that are like a big wild card that can flip on you. They may not agree with that.
What if the United States get into some kind of homegrown uprising? What you have to hope for is that you have the Navy against all others. Otherwise, the general population is going to be in trouble.
Hmm.
yeah, because you know what? Listen, um, people love the army, people love the Air Force, but understand something: the bulk of the power is in the Navy. The Navy, the Navy has That's the bulk of the power between the air power, the ability for shore bombardment, the Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Navy. There's a lot of firepower in the Navy.
Yep. The Navy is its own military within the military establishment. It has the Air Force. It has the missiles. and it has the submarines.
Hmm.
And if worse comes to worse,
Yeah.
even though no one has battleships anymore, the destroyers and the cruisers are capable of shore bombardment. They can't they can't fire 20 22 miles like battleships can, but they can still fire, I believe, 12 to 14 miles. Good enough.
Technically, technically, the Navy have the Marines too. The Marines are a department of the Navy.
Correct. And the Marines, anything about the Marines, they follow orders. So the order is not going to be kill citizens. No, the order is going to be restore peace and order, restore law and order. There are there are traitors or there are unlawful citizens violating our rights and freedoms. They want to end our freedoms, so they must be put down to restore law and order. That's how it will be worded. And do not for one second think that those orders won't be followed. They will be followed. They will. This is not the movies.
Well,
So
you don't think there will be a mutiny between um, somebody pushing a button to bomb groups of white nationalists and whatnot in the country, and that other white nationalists who may be enlisted in these military branches won't respond to that as well.
you're assuming first of all, there are several assumptions there. The assumptions are that any of these so-called white nationals are in are in positions to give orders. That's an assumption. Not I'm not saying you specifically, but that idea, because I hear that idea trumpeted in many different circles. The assumption is that these quote unquote white nationals are in positions of decision making authority within the military.
Well, they are. I mean, this they go all the way up to the top. It's like on a submarine
Mhm.
or carrier. There's always a CIA officer on there, maybe more than one. So it depends on. They might say that well, this admiral is in charge of this fleet, But like I said, there's always a CIA officer. People see see the story about the Russians. They always have a KGB officer on the submarine
A
that
political officer.
may or may not be able to overrule the captain. See, every country runs its military like that. Somebody's on there who's going to call MI6 or the French, you know, hey, your captain is acting irregular, erratic. He's not following orders. And so too is the white nationalists. What the nationalists always got people in high positions. Always. They are on both sides. They
Mhm.
are on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up because Richard Spencer and a couple of others have talked about infiltrating the military, infiltrating law enforcement, infiltrating state agencies in order to prevent something like that from happening. Which was why I was surprised that Paul brought that up because they seem to have already the FBI has already reported that these guys have large numbers of infiltrated of all these branches of government.
So I guess maybe I have underestimated their presence. Then I stand corrected.
They've been there since the beginning of the country. Since we gotta understand, we fought a war because of that. When the South said, you know what, we going our way, they had their own congressmen, their own Robert E. Lee used to teach at was in charge of West Point. So you know that they're everywhere in the government. We the government works because the selfish power. They have this little balance, this dance with power. That's how the U.S. government works. And you got people outside, the wealthy people, who you got military people who, when something starts up, that if I am say I am on A side in on the pyramid, and my counterparts on B side. When something starts up, I call my military general. I say, "Hey, look, this is going on. Can you go down and talk to the other guy down there and see if he can straighten out this stuff before it get out of hand?" and that's how it works. You don't see anybody jumping out of windows. The minute you see people start jumping out of windows, then you have to worry.
But see,
Somebody's throwing them out of the windows. They're not
oh,
jumping.
okay. Well, on a not so maybe on a partially philosophical level, but I think also on a more realistic level. See, I kind of question how much um, a straight up quote unquote, and I kind of loathe to use that term, white nationalist, who's about I hate dark skinned people, and that's what it is. How much actual power and influence they actually wield versus the people who feel that, well, look, listen, for us, it's all about power and control. We will use these quote unquote white national people if it suits our interests, but that's not where our interests lie. It's about power and control. And if those quote unquote white nationalists get a little bit out of hand at any time, we can always put them down because they don't hold the true power and influence. So that's from from an intellectual level, I've always questioned how much true power and influence those actual quote unquote white nationalist people who hate anyone who isn't white, how much power they actually hold versus the people who hold the real power and control, whose mindset is it's all about power and money and control. That's it.
You remember the president of the Philippines when he came into office and started running a program to kind of straighten out things in his country.
Which one?
Duterte.
Duterte. I
Duarte.
remember an instance where every all these congressmen, even Obama, started going in on Duterte. And this one congressman came out and said, "Leave Duterte alone." And from that day, I mean from that very day, nobody said anything about Duterte. Not one word in the newspapers, not one negative, nothing negative. It stopped that very day. That's so you know, that's how you know who has control of what in America.
Well, I said the
You don't
same.
watch that, but I watched that.
I said the same exact thing when Senator Obama was running for president because there was a there was a debate among the candidates, and I saw Rush Limbaugh calling him Senator Obama, Mr. Obama, being very respectful and showing extreme deference. I saw Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and even that piece of garbage Don Imus all doing the same thing. Senator Obama, Mr. Obama, extreme deference, and I knew right then and there. I knew right then and there in 2007. I said, you know what? He will be the next president. He will be the first black president. You know why? Because clearly they got the call. They were told, he's our guy. You leave him alone. In fact, you do everything you can to paint him in the best light possible. Okay, so I agree with what you just said. People who hold the real power, and I say this all the time, whatever name you want to give them, the unseen hand, the deep state, whatever name, the wealthy elite, you may not see the names, you may not see them move, but they hold the real power. And even presidents are nothing but puppets. And JFK felt he was not a puppet. They put a bullet in his brain, and LBJ straightened right up.
Well, I mean, Kennedy got popped when once he went after APAC, so Israel took him out pretty quickly.
I I think it was a I think it was a lot more than just that. I really don't think it. Quite honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with Israel at all. At all. There were much more deeper things going on there.
Well,
There was
he had a lot of oppositional forces around him, but it wasn't until he started spying on Israel on their nuclear program in Haifa, and as well as making APAC register as a foreign agent, that happened. It was only a few weeks after he did that.
Well, President Kennedy was also going to stand down in Vietnam. He was going to bring those troops home. He was going to change the CIA. He was actually even seriously talking about dismantling the CIA and rolling entire operations into the FBI and a few other things that he was going to quote unquote make make public. So I
Mhm.
don't think that it was specifically the Israel thing, the APAC thing. But
Yeah,
again, hey,
he was going after the banking system. He was going. Kennedy was going after a lot of things. And,
yeah, yeah,
all these guys got together.
yeah, yeah.
All of them got together.
Right. I don't think it was any one thing. I don't think it was any one driving thing. There were several interests from several circles, and as far to the actual deed, there are a lot of public documents if you pull them from many different sources that have Alan Dulles' hand all over that. The director of the CIA, who JFK fired after the failed Bay of, Bay of Pigs attempt to kill Castro. What are we
Right.
looking at, Mike?
Oh,
Uh,
Ilhan Omar,
she,
Congresswoman.
she's an
What do you?
interesting character. I don't know who she works for, but whoever she's working for is allowing her to say some things that everybody was afraid to say before.
I'm a little bit out of the loop. You gentlemen care to fill me in?
She went after Elliot Abrams this week, and
She
she
went
pretty much,
after APAC too.
yeah, yeah. So she pretty much grilled him about the Contras and
Contra.
the Contras in Latin America that he was responsible for and hustling of the guns and gun trafficking and things of that nature and civilian deaths. And
Didn't she learn from Oliver North, General Secord, or Admiral Secord, and Vice President Bush?
See the if you see, I don't know if you guys see something. There's a new crop of young um, movers and shakers coming up in the government all over the West, France, Italy, here in the U.S. New congressmen.
mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, they're all freshmen, and usually in high school, a freshman gets the wedgie. But I don't know if you could do that to some of these women. Be lucky if they have anything on under there. You lift up their hijab, might be nothing under there. So,
You better watch out, Mike. You're gonna get called a toxic male.
well, they're calling her toxic for right now because that guy Elliot Abrams felt that she was attacking him.
mhm.
And I don't think it was an attack. I think that she stood her ground pretty well, and it's good to see a black woman. Um, and I know some of these ADOS, these ADOS people want to say, "Oh, well, she's not really African American." The fuck difference does it make, you fucking idiots? But
you know, that nonsense. Because you know what, I hear the same. My brother and I had this discussion just the other day. I had the same nonsense from so many American black people. Okay, because they wanna claim me for demographic reasons, but yet most of the time when I say, hey, I'm West Indian, I have no accent because I was born here. But so it's please.
yeah,
They don't know who they are. They don't know what their narrative are. They don't know what their agenda is, which is nothing besides being anti-white and just name calling people.
yeah.
Who?
But she actually came out as a black woman on her response to all of this when they told her to apologize for quote unquote anti-Semitism. In reality, she never said anything that was anti-Semitic. Um, but she came out as said as African women, black women, or black people, I should say, are oppressed by the same powers. She feels it's in her duty to speak up. So
You know,
I commend her for that, rather than that moron who ran for governor in Georgia and talked about building sanctuary cities in predominantly black neighborhoods. I just thought that was ludicrous. I mean, who's the real black? Who's the real pro black here?
You know, that's funny because first off, the only anti-Semitic person or people are whoever Jewish people don't like. So they call them anti-Semitic. So that's BS. So I reject that out of hand. And
Well, all these people talking about anti-Semite is if they study her history, they will know that she's more Semitic than they are.
true, I didn't want to go there, but you're right. You're right because but that's going to take us down a whole other rabbit hole entirely, which is the only reason why I didn't want to go there. But you're 100% accurate. But because then now we talk about what what an actual Jew was and Jewish. But again, I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. I
Uh,
will say this, uh, as Mike said, with all the issues on the plate that Black American people have, sanctuary cities, seriously. I mean, we talked just the night on another hangout about how instead of building parks and basketball parks and rec centers in black neighborhoods, we need to have trade schools and engineering and design centers and programs for young black youth to get into engineering and coding and blockchain and programming and civil engineering, mathematics, So immigration, that's that's not that's not my issue personally, and I also don't think that's something that American black people need to be focused on right now.
I gotta agree with you on that point. All of these young black people who are going into government, we have to capture their minds and get them to get the programs that we need. Like you were saying, trade schools and such. We need that in the black community because that's what's going to be in the future. The robots, when they start redesigning themselves, is going to be 20 years down the road. So right now, we need the black people in Congress here to say, you know what are you going to offer us? Are you going to put in place these programs that put schools, proper schools, good schools, that's going to educate the people to get the, AI into our community? And if they can't answer that question, or if they him and hawing, then you got to get them out.
Absolutely, so I don't want to hear about the congressional black caucus
Oh,
because the congressional black caucus is a steaming pile of failure. All right, I say it all the time. American black people have two case studies: the Japanese people and the German people. Two nations literally bombed to dust, and in less than 40 years, they turned themselves into two of the top five most powerful economies on earth. Japan has waned some, Germany hasn't. Germany economically basically runs Europe right now. Okay? So those are two case studies. Instead of working on your jump shot, or instead of young black youth running behind Cardi B, or worrying about what black woman is sleeping with what black man and wearing saggy pants with rainbow colored hair and beads in their head, they need to be learning blockchain and about satellites and about astrophysics. Okay, things that are of use and of benefit, as opposed to 8-hour hangouts pissing your money away to some hustler. You need to educate yourselves. Trade schools, design schools, engineering schools. Those are things that are of benefit. And that also means asking people of whatever ethnicity or religious background they may be how funds are being allocated or not being allocated, then by all means, those are questions that need to be asked. I don't care who's sleeping with who. That's irrelevant. That is a waste of everyone's time. Name calling, worrying about who's overdosing, again, total and absolute waste of your time. I don't want to hear how water is wet. What I do want to hear is how black youth are flooding design and engineering schools, creating curating blockchain, curating new technologies. Those are things that are of substance and of benefit. Not worrying about who's sleeping with who and name calling and who's dying from drug overdoses. Sorry,
Yeah.
my rant over.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just, I want to leave her picture up there because that's a beautiful black woman, might I add, who actually stands for something. So we will honor her for the next, 5 or 10 minutes.
You can always tell a woman's true beauty if she still looks good without the makeup. Because I'm seeing the picture with the lipstick and makeup on, and this picture here, no makeup on, and the beauty comes through. So yeah,
Hmm.
I second that.
Well, most black women look like that. I'm serious. It's to me. You know what I'm saying? That's in my mind. It's
Uh,
when they start putting on the makeup and trying to do the foolishness that other people they see other people do that you destroy your outer beauty. The inner
uh,
beauty is another problem, but the outer beauty is destroyed by the industry that they jump into.
okay. I won't.
So,
I won't touch that because that's a matter of personal taste and preference.
Uh,
I'm gonna say that Miss Omar, Congresswoman, and AOC will be attacked until they bow out gracefully. You think that they will stick around for the next
AOC
cycle?
is well. First of all, AOC is a fraud. She's not from the Bronx. She's from Yorktown Heights, which
What's
is
the difference?
well. She claims she's from the South Bronx or from the North Bronx, two very poor neighborhoods. She's from Yorktown Heights. She's from money. She comes from money. She's like that congresswoman that you were telling me from Boston, who's trying.
Oh, Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. Same thing with Ocasio Cortez. She comes from money. She did not grow up poor. She grew up in a upper class neighborhood. She comes from money. She went to one of the same Manhattan prep schools that I sent my daughter to. Only difference is her parents probably paid for the full ride. Okay, so she's a fraud. She comes from money.
Hmm.
well,
So
look,
I
you can look at what happened to Barack Obama. How did he make it to Harvard? You know, even if you get a scholarship to Harvard, there's still other extras that you got to pay for. Who paid for it? You know, this it in America today. Um, Clinton and Gore, for instance, if you can go back that far, both of them went to the same school. They were trained to be president of the United States. Somebody raised them up. They got scholarship from a man in Congress that people know talk too much about to go to England to study
a Rhodes Scholar.
Rhodes.
Well, see, that's that's the reason why I sent my daughter to one of those Manhattan prep schools because I wanted her in those circles. One of my daughter's friends who was in her class. His father was President Obama's campaign manager. Okay, so these are the individuals that she's in those circles. So I get that. There's nothing wrong in coming from money, but Ocasio Cortez has tried to and has garnered all this support as this working class girl who grew up poor with no money, and that's a lie. She's garnered that support on a lie. She comes from money and came from money. That's not how she grew up and knows nothing about that. That's
Maybe
my
maybe
issue.
maybe she didn't have enough money to get on the train one day on the A train or something.
If she grew up in Yorktown Heights, she was probably driven to whatever she was driven to one of the private schools that she went to. I'm sure of it.
Hmm.
Well, in my opinion, when you find somebody like that, you don't really. pound them will, no, you lying, you grew up here. You say, okay, since you say that you were this and this and this, what are you going to do for me? What are you doing for the community that you say you grew up in? This is what we want from you. This is what you have to give us. If you don't give us this, you're out.
You're
Since
right.
you claim that you know what we want and you're one of us, now you got to work for us for real.
Well, you know what? See, the thing with that is, and I agree with you 1,000%. That's what should happen. That's what needs to happen. However, you know, there were, there is a saying down in the West Indies: "A promise is a comfort to a fool." So all you have to do historically is make promises to people of these communities, and they're happy and they go away.
No,
Right?
you get somebody to sit down and talk to her, and she submit her letter of resignation the day after.
I
That's it.
I
Period.
agree. I
You send
agree.
in a letter of resignation. We talked to the governor and said, look, here's this person that we want in there. We think that he can do a good job and he will support you in anything that you want to do. But in the meantime, he's got to do what we want him to do.
And
And the governor said, okay, you put to replace her. That's it.
and
That's the way you
I
got to do it. This is America is the way. I mean, to me, I look at politics in America. From the time I started looking at it real seriously, man, it's like, wow, I like this.
well, see the thing is this though. I like that idea totally, but that does not happen from the general public. That does not happen to the general constituents. So the idea that the people from these neighborhoods in the area of the Bronx who voted her into office, that they will hold her accountable based on history of the politics of this country. There's a snowball's chance in hell of that ever happening if we're being intellectually honest. With all of that said, uh, time will tell. Maybe she's on the up and up as far as what she plans to do or what she wants to do. I can say that in local politics, here in New York City, local politics, I've seen politicians come in office and make promises and make good on those promises and do things, but more and more time they spend within the political machine, then they become just like every other politician, a talking head. So my view on Miss Ocasio Cortez, I'm not familiar with this particular young uh, lady right here, Miss Omar. But my personal view on Miss Ocasio Cortez, I'm just waiting for her to become a jaded politician, a member of the machine like everyone else. Until she proves me wrong, it's only a matter of time.
All right. On that note, we will sign off. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back on Friday with economics, and you all have a good night.